Chapter 323. On Earth, although there would often be some small-scale wars, even a year of war would definitely not be as great as today's losses. Pope Marty's expression was grim. He was left with less than 30% of his holy energy. Meanwhile, the losses of the armies of the various countries continued to rise. Although the losses were not as heavy as they were at the beginning of the war, even with the help of the powerhouses of the Vatican, the armies of the various countries were still losing tens of thousands of people every day, and the losses of various weapons were uncountable. However, what made the armies of the various countries and the Vatican puzzled was that the burning legion in Hell City did not seem to be in a hurry to destroy them. They only attacked once every hour, and the number of troops they sent out each time would not exceed 50,000. As long as the armies of the various countries at the front were repelled, the burning legion would retreat again. On the walls of Hell City, there is a Hell Mage of the burning legion every 10 meters or so. A total of more than 30,000 Hell Mages were intermittently chanting difficult incantations, causing the surroundings of Hell City to be covered in a layer of strange dark red energy. The defense of this dark red energy was not something that humans could imagine. After the Battle of the Asteroids, although the various countries had used up a lot of their nuclear bombs, it did not mean that they did not have any left. However, after the various countries gritted their teeth and ordered a few nuclear bombs to bombard Hell City, the only unlucky ones were the various countries' armies. A large amount of radiation became the natural defense of Hell City below and around it. Meanwhile, Hell City itself was protected by the dark red energy. There were no signs of damage, and it continued to launch a powerful attack every hour. Hell City had also become an incomparably solid defense. At this moment, the people around Marty were the higher-ups of the Allied forces. Due to the initial failure, the general had been removed from his position. Now, every country had sent a general of the level of a marshal here to fight against the enemies with the Pope. Your Highness, it's been hard on you. If not for your Holy Legion blocking the enemy's crazy attacks, I'm afraid our losses would have been even greater, a German general said sincerely. Marty sighed, shook his head, and said, Now, we've only temporarily blocked their attacks, but I can't say for how long. You've also seen that although the Vatican can deal a certain blow to the enemy, their numbers are far greater than ours. However, their numbers are incomparable to ours. The Church's expenditure is undoubtedly huge. I don't know how many more times I can withstand such a charge. After a short day of battle, less than 60% of the Sacred Legion still had combat strength. Although the newly recruited Sacred Legion had been baptized by his divine energy, their combat skills and energy were still relatively weak. They had already been sacrificed in the previous battle. Only after truly confronting the Burning Legion did Marty understand how terrifying Satan and his hellish world were. This was especially true for the 3,000 or so hell creatures in the lead. Wherever they went, the people would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. If not for the fact that he and the 4 red-robed archbishops had fully activated their divine power and received a boost from the special energy from the heavenly realm before the descent of hell, they would not have been able to survive. The losses of the Allied forces would be at least 3 times that of what they had now. Then what should we do now? As you can see, modern weapons can hardly harm those evil creatures. Don't tell me we're just going to sit here and wait for death. The Pope shook his head and said, No, now is not the time to sit and wait for death. If my judgment was correct, from the start of the battle until now, none of the hell creatures had used their full strength, except for the fallen angel Lucifer. Hell's most powerful demon king, Satan, had only appeared once at the beginning. If he had ordered his burning legion to attack with all their might, I'm afraid the Allied forces would have long been broken through. I really don't understand what Satan is waiting for now. Perhaps he still has a certain degree of fear towards our weapons. He's afraid that after leaving that dark city, they will be attacked by nuclear bombs again. Without the protection of that city, no matter how powerful they are, they won't be able to fight against nuclear bombs. I don't think it can compete with a nuclear bomb, a French general said. Marty shook his head and said, If you think so, then you're underestimating Satan too much. As a demon king of hell, let alone one nuclear bomb, even 10 or 100 of them won't be able to harm him. Perhaps you still remember the scene when the asteroid was about to hit Earth. In a situation where thousands of nuclear bombs did not change the asteroid's orbit, an Eastern powerhouse, with the support of his companions, forcefully changed the asteroid's orbit. And Satan's strength is definitely not weaker than that powerhouse's. As long as he makes a move, no modern weapons can harm him. There's no doubt about that. So, I'm guessing that he still hasn't used his full strength, as though he's waiting for something. Among the generals, the one who looked the youngest was a general from England. He was a lieutenant general, the one with the lowest rank among those present. A trace of shock suddenly appeared on his resolute and handsome face. Could it be that he's waiting for us to gather our troops, so that he can capture all of us in one fell swoop? Hearing this, everyone quietened down, and a sense of fear appeared in every general's heart. If that was really the case, then these hell creatures were really too terrifying. They actually wanted to completely end the battle in Berlin. Once they completely defeated the armies of the various countries, then when they set foot in Europe and even the entire West, there would be no power that could stop them from advancing. Could it be that Satan had not made a move yet because he was waiting for more allied forces to appear? Marty's expression also changed. Although he was not Satan, nor was he familiar with Satan, he understood that from the perspective of the hell creatures, this was obviously the best way to invade. However, he understood that from the perspective of the hell creatures, this was obviously the best way to invade. First, they would eliminate all of the enemy's fighting forces. Then they would start a full-scale invasion. In a situation where hell had enough strength, this was obviously a very good idea. What should we do now? The German general who spoke first asked, somewhat at a loss. No one could answer his question, not even Marty, because even if they knew that this was Satan's plan, they could not retreat now and let the burning legion wreak havoc in the West. If only he was here. Marty sighed, and that person's face appeared in his mind. Your Highness the Pope, this him you're talking about back then, was it? Marty nodded and said, that's right. That's him. If he was here, then Satan might not be that scary. Unfortunately, he's an Easterner, and he's already gone. Just as he said this, suddenly, the entire meeting hall shook violently. Then, a strong roar and countless screams sounded at the same time. Such a defense. Do you want to stop me? A cold voice sounded. The next moment, the roof of the meeting hall, which was strong enough to withstand the shockwave of a nuclear bomb, suddenly split from the center. Two giant black hands actually tore the roof apart. What the group, led by Pope Marty, saw was a pair of red eyes and 12 black wings. I didn't expect you humans to be so smart. You can actually guess my thoughts. Since that's the case, I'll leave your corpses intact. Back then, I've seen a human war movie. That beheading operation made me yearn for it. This time, does this count as me carrying out a beheading operation? Ha ha. Satan's proud laughter caused everyone below to fall into panic. No one expected that the demon king of hell they were talking about would suddenly appear here. Everyone's hearts trembled violently. That enormous dark aura, the huge dark aura, made it difficult for the generals of the various countries to even move. They were now cursing in their hearts. Who was the one who brought a movie with a beheading operation to Satan? Satan, you'll pay for everything you've done today, Marty shouted in a deep voice. At this moment, only he could still maintain a bit of calmness. Holy light seeped out of his body, contending against Satan from afar. However, he had already weakened a lot of his holy energy and was unable to face the huge pressure brought by Satan. His expression was becoming more and more unsightly. Marty knew his holy army, which was guarding outside, was finished. The 4 red-robed archbishops and the chief inquisitor were the front lines, ready to receive the enemy's attack at any time. Now, he could only rely on his own strength. Satan looked at Marty, his eyes filled with disdain. If the Emperor of Heaven was here, perhaps I would have some misgivings. You're just a dog released by the celestial emperor in the mortal world. With that bit of godly power of yours, I can't believe you. With that bit of divine power of yours, it's far from enough. Now, you can all die. The entire room in the conference hall was instantly destroyed. In front of Satan, the generals were like eggs that could break at any time. There was no possibility of concealing themselves. Everyone's gaze froze. Facing Satan's towering body that was more than 10 meters tall, they knew that death was coming. Marty raised the scepter in his hand, the holy aura on his body becoming more and more intense. He knew that he had to use that move before he died. Even if he died, he would at least cause some trouble for Satan. Unfortunately, he had yet to fully comprehend the ability of that move, and his own energy was far from his peak state. Just as Satan raised his hand and was about to wave it, his expression suddenly became extremely unsightly. His entire body froze, and his gaze was no longer focused on the Pope. A long howl, like the sound of nature, pierced through the sky. The strong howl shook the entire military camp. A green light illuminated half the sky. Like a meteor chasing after the moon, the light descended upon Berlin in an instant. "Bastard, it's you again." Satan fiercely turned around, and the 12 wings on his back flapped at the same time. In almost an instant, he had already flown into the air. Dark red flames instantly ignited, dyeing his powerful 12 wings, making him look even more berserk. The green light and the dark red light formed a sharp contrast in midair. In just an instant, the two lights had already overlapped in midair. Boom! A huge energy fluctuation erupted in midair thousands of meters high. The location of the explosion was the center of the confrontation between the human allied forces and Hell City. An indescribable, huge green and red shockwave appeared in an instant. Almost instantly, a huge pit appeared on the ground thousands of meters below the center of the explosion. Everything that was originally there was completely vaporized. Even Hell City in the distance trembled slightly. At the front line of the European Union's allied forces, a large number of mechanized troops were sent flying in all directions. If it were not for the fact that there were not many troops stationed there, the losses would have been even greater. The green and red light lasted in midair for a full 10 seconds before slowly fading away. Satan was still floating there, but the wings on his back had expanded twice as much as before. His face was full of anger as he stared 100 meters in front of him. 100 meters in front of him, a human in black armor floated silently. There was only a pair of black wings on his back. In the dark night, if it wasn't for the green light enveloping his body and his long silver hair, it would have been easy to miss him. However, he had now become the focus of the European Union's allied forces. The Pope dispersed the energy he had gathered in a panic. Looking at the green figure in the air, his voice suddenly became a little choked. "He's here. He's finally here at the most critical moment." Since the beginning of the battle, the Vatican had become the absolute main force. Although the Pope had commanded the Vatican for many years, as a human with a high status and power, this was his first time on the battlefield. After gritting his teeth and persisting for so long, that person had finally arrived. At this moment, his whole body produced a feeling of collapse. His complexion had also become much better. With a smile on his face, Chiyu looked at Satan in front of him and said, "Your Majesty the Demon King, we meet again. How is long hair?" Satan shouted angrily, "You're not allowed to mention my daughter. You don't have that right." Chiyu shrugged helplessly and said, "But Long Air is already my daughter. If you're willing, why don't you go back to hell and be my father-in-law? Wouldn't it be better to enjoy the happiness of a family?" Satan was filled with anger when he saw Chiyu. What Chiyu had done in the infernal realm could be said to be the greatest humiliation to the entire infernal realm. Ever since the appearance of the infernal realm, no one had been able to successfully escape from the ravages of the infernal realm. Chiyu's appearance had already made Satan fully vigilant. He knew very well how powerful Chiyu was, and he seemed to have become even more powerful than when he had been in hell the last time. In particular, the energy undulations on his body had become extremely frightening. Even Satan couldn't completely determine the characteristics of his current energy. What worried Satan even more was Chiyu's craftiness. Previously, he had made use of various situations to deal a heavy blow to the Burning Legion. What was he going to do this time? Also, Where had that monster that even Satan felt that he couldn't resist gone to? If he was here, he probably wouldn't be able to resist the two of them if they joined forces. I've been preparing for the descent of hell for countless years. How can I change it just because of a sentence from you? Since you've chosen to be my enemy, then your only outcome is destruction. Satan's voice was still overbearing, but there was a hint of fear in it. Looking at Satan's flickering gaze, Chiyu said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty still didn't listen to my advice and came to Earth. This isn't a world that belongs to you. At the same time, it isn't a world that belongs to the Netherworld either. Since you've chosen destruction, then don't blame me for being impolite. At most, I'll spare your life on account of lung air." "What did you say?" Red light shot out of Satan's eyes, and the dark energy in his body instantly burst forth. Although he didn't have the assistance of the purple sun on Earth, the dark energy in his body wasn't too affected. Although he didn't have the assistance of the purple sun on Earth, the dark energy in his body wasn't too affected. Chiyu smiled and said, "Why? Does your Majesty not understand what I'm saying?" His expression suddenly became ice cold, and he said word by word, "I said, I'm going to completely destroy all of you." The faint green light became more and more overbearing. Chiyu's entire body was like a sharp blade filled with surging energy. It was like a sharp blade filled with a surging energy aura. That sharp feeling forced Satan to use all his energy to resist it. At this moment, Chiyu's hands were stretched out by his sides, and there was an additional blue ball of light in each of his hands. Bolts of lightning revolved around his hands and flickered unceasingly. The huge energy aura didn't feel the slightest bit shaky. A layer of silver light constantly circulated around his body. That huge pressure made Satan feel even more shocked. You want to stop me by yourself? Don't forget, there's still the Burning Legion in Hell City. Even if you can stop me from beheading them, you can't stop the 3 million Burning Legion from wreaking havoc. Kid, this isn't a duel, but a war between hell and you humans. Just you wait, I'll let you see how hell devours the earth." The dark red light behind his back suddenly retracted, and the Demon King's domain was released in an instant. Countless Satan's figures suddenly appeared in front of Chiyu. Just as he relaxed a little, Satan's original body had completely disappeared. The green light formed a strangulation formation in front of Chiyu, and in an instant, those figures were completely crushed. Floating in the air, Chiyu couldn't help but reveal a cold smile. It seems that Satan is much more rational than before. He actually didn't fight me head-on. However, do you think that your Burning Legion is useful just because they have a large number? No, you're wrong. You have the Burning Legion. Similarly, I have my Zodiac Legion. Satan naturally couldn't hear what Chiyu was saying, and Hell City had fallen into complete silence, as if it was quietly waiting for something. In the blink of an eye, he floated down. In the blink of an eye, Chiyu had already landed in front of the house that he had disappeared from, and the energy aura on his body had been completely retracted. "Your Highness the Pope, we meet again," Chiyu said calmly as he looked at Marty, who didn't have a good expression on his face. Marty looked at Chiyu excitedly. "Mr. Chi, have you achieved your goal in the heavenly realm?" Chiyu sighed softly, shook his head, and said, "No, I haven't. I've been delayed in the heavenly realm. How's the situation here?" At this moment, the generals who had just escaped from death had just recovered from a shock. Looking at the black-armored Chiyu in front of them, they had a question in their hearts. Was this person really human? He actually used his own strength to chase away that demon just now. No, he definitely wasn't human. He should be a god. Every general looked at Chiyu with incomparable respect. The name Mr. Chi was deeply imprinted in their minds. For many years to come, whenever the name Mr. Chi was mentioned in the Western military, it would immediately cause a violent reaction. The name Mr. Chi had become synonymous with God in the West. The Pope briefly explained the current situation to Chiyu. "If you hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid we would have been finished. Mr. Chi, you've seen it for yourself. The Hell Army has completely gathered here. I'm afraid they'll launch an all-out attack soon. You're the most powerful. How do you think we should deal with the Hell Army?" Chiyu glanced at the generals and said, I don't care how you deal with the Hell Army. Although I'm here to help, as the saying goes, a guest shouldn't oppress the host. Moreover, I don't know much about war. As for the specific arrangements, it's up to you. I can only guarantee that when the Hell Army moves out, I'll immediately appear on the opposite side. I think it won't be easy for Satan to rush out of here. Your Highness, your body's condition is terrible. I think you should first think of a way to recover your abilities. Marty couldn't die yet, at least not now. The Vatican was not weak. With them here, it would be much easier to deal with the Burning Legion. So, although he wasn't a friend in Chiyu's heart, Chiyu still reminded him. Marty let out a bitter laugh and said, I know that I've used up a lot of energy, but before you came, I didn't even have time to sit down and rest. It's all good now. You don't have to be humble. You're the only one who can fight against Satan. We'll follow your instructions in all things. Against an enemy like the Hell Army, any tactics are useless. What do you say, generals? Marty spoke in English, and with the energy of the origin of nature, Chiyu could naturally understand him. As soon as Marty's voice fell, the generals of the various countries agreed in unison. Not a single one of them objected. Satan's beheading operation just now had really scared them. For a moment, they didn't know how to deal with such a powerful enemy. Now, against the attack of the Hell Army, their army was just a human wall. They had to use their blood and lives to stop the Burning Legion's advance. At this moment, Chiyu's appearance was equivalent to having a pillar of support for them. They were naturally willing to listen to Chiyu's orders. Looking at the generals who no longer had any fighting spirit, Chiyu couldn't help but frown and said, If that's the case, then let's do it this way. The battle between us and the Hell Army isn't something that ordinary people can handle. The armies of various countries will only suffer greater losses here. In my opinion, why don't you all retreat 100 miles and set up camp there? The clergy of the Vatican will stay and cooperate with me to stop the Burning Legion. Hearing Chiyu's words, the generals immediately felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Retreating 100 miles was definitely a wonderful thing for them. Who would want to fight the non-human Burning Legion again? In their eyes, Chiyu wasn't just a god. He was also the incarnation of an angel. If Chiyu knew that these generals equated him with Birdman, who knew what he would think? The generals hurriedly agreed and immediately went to give orders to their troops. Only Chiyu and the Supreme Pontiff were left in the meeting hall. Marty looked at Chiyu worriedly and said, Mr. Chi, can we really stop the Burning Legion with just us? Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, Never underestimate your own power. In my opinion, the Vatican probably hasn't released a large portion of its power yet. It's just that the appearance of the Hell Army was too sudden, so they lost the initiative in the panic. Your Highness, you've led the Vatican for so many years. Now, you don't need me to teach you what to do. This is what I'm thinking. First, we'll hold Satan's Burning Legion back here. We'll do our best to deal a certain degree of damage to them, and let Satan feel that he and his men can't stop us. Then, we'll lure the underworld King Hades here. When they're all gathered here, we'll kill them all in one fell swoop. At this point, Chiyu fiercely waved his right hand. Marty really thought that there was something wrong with his ears. He looked at Chiyu with his mouth agape. Mr. Chi, did I hear wrongly? You're saying that we're going to lure the people from the underworld here and kill them all in one fell swoop? Yes. Is there a problem? Chiyu glanced at Marty. Marty suddenly realized how bright Chiyu's eyes were. He immediately swallowed his doubtful voice and said embarrassedly, No, of course there's no problem. Don't worry, I'll gather all the Vatican's power in the world as soon as possible. I'll gather all the clergy and wait for your orders. But, Mr. Chi, can I ask you for a favor? What is it? Chiyu asked calmly. Marty walked to Chiyu's side and whispered a few words in his ear. After listening to his words, Chiyu's face revealed a trace of surprise. So that's how it is. I thought you guys really weren't prepared. I understand now. No wonder the Emperor Heaven said that to me when I left the heavenly realm. All right, I can help you. Marty was overjoyed. Thank you, Mr. Chi. From now on, no matter what you need, as long as the Vatican can do it, we'll do it as soon as possible. Your orders will be the same as mine. All the clergy, Enough. Chiyu stopped Marty from continuing. Do you think the power of the Vatican is of any use to me? Go, call your cardinals here. We'll start immediately. Although Marty had met with a rebuff, he still left happily. Chiyu coldly snorted as he watched Marty's back. Marty, although everything you've done has greatly improved compared to before, it's still not enough. But you're the same as Yumo. Things between us will have to be resolved eventually. Pray that you can sacrifice your life for the Vatican. If that's the case, maybe I'll let the Vatican go. Although the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Queen and when Ting died to save Chiyu, Klinsmann really died at the hands of the Pope's 4 cardinals. Chiyu had never forgotten this. However, when Chiyu said that he did not notice a small white ball of light flickering in a corner of the ruins on the ground, Marty, who had just left, suddenly stiffened. He looked back in the direction he had left in, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He let out a long sigh and shook his head before continuing in the direction he had originally wanted to go. In the United States, at the border of Kansas, thousands of American citizens who originally belonged to Kansas were slowly walking forward like walking corpses. It was as if an invisible force was driving them to walk out of the state. Everyone's eyes were completely empty, and a dusky aura filled their surroundings. It was an aura filled with deathly stillness, as if the vitality in their bodies had been completely extinguished. Not a single person in the huge crowd spoke. They just silently moved forward. A few gray figures floated in the air. Their faces could not be seen due to the thick gray fog. Rust, these humans from Earth are really weak. They are so weak that I can't be bothered to harvest their souls. A voice came from the gray fog. Novit, don't complain. Although each of these humans is very weak, if there are enough of them, it will still be beneficial to our cultivation. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to waste time digesting the soul aura of the millions of humans we absorbed. Didn't His Highness the King of Hell already turn them into zombie warriors? It will get easier for us in the future. We'll just let the humans kill each other under the control of our nether energy. The place where the American army is stationed should be not far ahead. We'd better be careful. Chapter 324. Russ said, "That's true. I heard that the Burning Hell Legion is still in a stalemate. His Highness Hell King and Satan have come to an agreement. Whoever occupies the territory will get it. While they haven't achieved anything yet, we have to expand our territory as much as possible. The strongest country on Earth will be our foundation in the future." Satan? That old fellow has lived for God knows how long. I originally thought that he would fight with His Highness Hell King. I didn't expect him to choose to cooperate. This proves that Satan is very smart. Cooperation is definitely beneficial to him. After all, whether it's hell or us, we don't belong to this world to begin with. It won't be too late for us to fight after we conquer this world. Otherwise, only humans will benefit. As he said that, Novitz suddenly exclaimed, "I seem to sense a very uncomfortable aura, but it also seems very familiar. What's going on?" Rust and Novit looked in the same direction at the same time. They saw a faint golden light filling the distance. From their position, they could only see some faint golden light. Let's go and take a look." The two masses of gray fog moved at the same time. Like arrows, they shot toward the location where the golden light had appeared. As they got closer, they could clearly feel that the golden energy waves were very strong. The uncomfortable feeling also became more and more intense. Rust's expression changed. "This is bad. This energy is very strong, and it seems to have a certain restraining effect on us. Moreover, it seems to have a certain restraining effect on us. Quickly report to His Highness." Novit nodded and raised his hand to send out a gray current in the direction they had come from. From afar, they could clearly see the energy aura of the golden light. It was a circular light cover with a diameter of about 50 meters. The faint golden light was transparent. They could vaguely see that there were more than 10 people standing in the light cover. Everyone's position was very coordinated. They counted carefully. There were a total of 12 people, and in the middle stood a woman. The golden light was constantly being released with the woman at the center. After being amplified by the 12 people around her, it became more and more intense. As the faint light flickered, Rust and Novit's expressions turned ugly. They could vaguely feel who the energy belonged to. At this time, the humans of Kansas had already been driven by them, and the vanguard troops were approaching the golden light. The tyrannical energy fluctuations became more and more intense. Suddenly, the golden light barrier released a fan-shaped light. It shrouded the humans. The golden light was filled with a holy aura, and it was very obvious in this pitch-black world. Almost in the blink of an eye, the humans at the very front stopped in their tracks. Every single one of them had a pained expression on their faces. It seemed to be struggling from something. Russ blurted out, "Not good. Our nether chi control has been blocked. Let's go and see what it is." With that, the two of them moved at the same time. They accelerated once again and pounced toward the golden light barrier. The pain on the faces of the humans who were enveloped by the golden light gradually disappeared. It was a sense of relief after being released. Their empty eyes gradually regained some vigor, and the gray airflow on their bodies was rapidly dissolving. However, their eyes were now completely confused. He had no idea what was going on. In the blink of an eye, the two clouds of gray fog had already stopped 100 meters away from the light barrier. They were getting closer, and the uncomfortable feeling became even more intense. Rust's feminine yet sharp voice rang out. Who are you? How dare you block the advance of the underworld army? They are humans, not the army of the underworld." The gentle and pleasant voice gave people the feeling of a spring breeze. However, this was not the case in the ears of Rust and Novit. Their bodies trembled violently at the same time, and the gray fog almost dissipated. In an instant, they retreated 100 meters. A huge pressure instantly shrouded their bodies from the front. This is the power of God," Novit said in shock. He exchanged glances with Rust. Through the gray fog, they could see the shock in each other's eyes. The power of God had actually appeared on Earth. It was definitely not a power that they could fight against. The figure in the center of the golden light barrier slowly rose up. What Rust and Novit saw was a woman shrouded in golden armor. Her soft and slender purple hair flowed behind her. The golden scepter in her hand represented her identity. It's Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. Athena, the same master as His Highness Hades. Our feud. Novit finally recognized who the newcomer was. Russ muttered, "No, this is impossible." His Highness said that because of the 9-star alignment, it is impossible for the divine realm to send anything to Earth. Even without the 9-star alignment, it is impossible for the divine realm to pass through the huge barrier and come to the human world. She is definitely not Athena. She definitely can't be. Yuma looked calmly at the two clouds of gray fog in front of her and said coldly, "You are wrong. The divine realm is omnipotent. His Highness God Emperor already knew that you were coming to Earth to cause trouble, so he sent me here. Where was Hades, the king of hell? Ask him to come out and see me." Immense divine power locked Rust and Novit in place, rendering them unable to move at all. Both of them gradually understood that this was not a dream. They were very familiar with the divine power of Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. Back in the divine realm, they had been very familiar with it. The battle between Hades and Athena had not stopped for a long time. Both of them had participated in such battles before, and now that Athena had reappeared, their previous confidence was completely shattered. Without Hades, the outcome of facing the goddess of war and wisdom with just two underworld generals was undeniable. So what if it is Athena? Not even you can stop me. The underworld has descended upon the human world, Novit said coldly. The gray fog around him and Rust quickly spread outwards, revealing their true forms. In terms of appearance, they were the same as the constellation protectors, with the appearance of humans, just that their bodies were covered with a layer of gray armor, and the armor was in the shape of gray crystals. Rust's body was very slender, and he looked like a woman. Novit's body was very tall. They constantly released underworld aura that was filled with deathly stillness to resist the divine power on Yuma's body. Mephisto's voice sounded. Destroy these two underworld generals first. With each death, Hades' power will be weakened. They only have 81 underworld generals. Yama naturally understood what Mephisto meant. They were very familiar with the situation in the underworld. This was naturally the best way. After all, in terms of numbers, she only had 12 guardians. Hades, on the other hand, had 81 underworld generals. In terms of power, back in the divine realm, Hades and Athena were on par. In fact, he was even stronger than Athena. However, after coming to the human world, Yamu had obtained Athena's inheritance. Compared to Athena, there was still a gap. Therefore, she was very clear that if she wanted to deal with Hades, it was absolutely not enough to rely on her own strength. Golden light shone from the scepter in her hand. A huge pressure instantly spread into a golden ring. With a wave of Yamu's right hand, it pressed towards Novit and Rust. As underworld generals, although Rust and Novit were slightly weaker than the Constellation Guardians, the difference was not too great. Otherwise, they would not have enough power to assist Hades in building the underworld. Seeing that Yamu was about to attack them, their rich combat experience was immediately displayed. Two rays of gray light shone at the same time. The underworld aura that they had released earlier instantly retracted and concentrated on their bodies. With a furious roar, they launched an attack towards Yamu. Countless gray air currents flew towards Yamu with mournful cries. Yamu's divine power and Hades' Underworld King's underworld aura were of completely opposite attributes. In other words, their energies were mutually exclusive. In the process of battle, it depended on whose energy was stronger and whose battle techniques were better to obtain victory. Although the two underworld generals in front of them were not weak, they were still a far cry from Yamu. Yamu moved. She had already sensed Hades' aura. If he came, she would no longer have the chance to kill the underworld general. Hence, she launched an attack immediately. The golden light transformed into countless thin lines in the air. The nether energy that was charging towards her dissipated in front of her. They were completely unable to attack her. As for Yamu herself, she transformed into a ray of golden flowing light and appeared in front of Rust and Novit in the blink of an eye. The golden light shone and the gray fog turned completely golden in an instant. Rust and Novit struggled in intense pain. However, no matter how hard they tried, their underworld aura could not break through Yamu's energy. Two blood-curdling screams rang out. Rust and Novit, who were wrapped in the golden light, disappeared along with the gray airflow. It was as though they had never existed in this world. The deathly underworld aura was purified by Yamu's divine power along with their life imprints. "How dare you?" A voice was heard from afar, accompanied by an ear-piercing shriek. The gray airflow seemed to have engulfed half the sky in an instant. Even in this completely dark environment, the gray airflow was still very obvious. In the time it took to take a few breaths, dozens of gray airflows had already flown over. Yama bellowed. The scepter in her hand transformed into a layer of golden light that completely blocked the gray airflow that was shrouding her. Her petite figure floated in the air and returned to the golden light shield in the blink of an eye. At this moment, her expression became unusually solemn. The scepter in her hand instantly transformed into Athena's spear and drew golden lines in midair. Wherever the golden lines passed, complicated symbols appeared in the original circular formation. The ground under the feet of every constellation guardian became the symbol that represented the constellation they belonged to. Hades was very angry. Ever since he had established the underworld, the 81 underworld generals had always been by his side. He had always believed that as long as he was around, his 81 most loyal subordinates would not die. However, just now, he had clearly sensed that the life imprints of two underworld generals had been erased by a powerful force at the same time. Novit had already sent the news to him. He knew that after he had come to Earth, he had ultimately met with resistance. In the distance, Hades led the 30 underworld generals and stopped 1,000 meters away from Yama's light shield. Hades' vision was naturally much sharper than his subordinates' underworld generals. With just one look, his expression changed. He squeezed out each word through gritted teeth. Athena, it's you again. Even though I have left the divine realm and come to Earth, you still chased after me. Floating in midair, Yamu and Hades looked at each other, one gold and one gray. Their gazes collided in midair. Both of their bodies swayed. On the surface, they seemed to be equally matched. However, Yamu was already at a slight disadvantage. After all, she still had the help of the 12 Constellation Guardians barrier. Under such circumstances, she was still losing to Hades in terms of mental pressure. This was something that Yamu had not expected. According to the information that the divine realm had given her, Hades should not be this powerful. Needless to say, this lord of the underworld must have become even more powerful after leaving the divine realm. Hello, Hades. Yamu's gentle voice traveled from afar. Athena, I did not expect that we would meet on Earth. Hades' expression had already calmed down. The death of the two underworld generals was a blow to him. However, it was far from serious. He had originally created these underworld generals. As long as he had enough time and souls, he could similarly create more underworld generals to be his subordinates. On Earth, there was nothing else but souls. Furthermore, there were many people with filthy souls in the United States. With a flash, Hades had already walked out of the crowd. He looked at Yamu and said disdainfully, I thought that Athena had really come to Earth. It turns out that she could not come and instead passed on her divine power to the human world. Only the divine realm could think of such a method. However, do you think that you, a human who has inherited Athena's divine power, can stop me from advancing? Yamu said calmly, whether I can or not is not within my consideration. What I want to do is to stop you. No matter how far I can go, I will always stand in front of you before I give up my life. A powerful battle intent emanated from Yamu's body. With the help of her 12 Constellation Guardians, her aura instantly surged, causing Hades' expression to change. Good. I never thought that a human who has just obtained a bit of divine power would dare to speak to me like this. Come, let me show you what the true power of God is. As he spoke, Hades' eyes had already turned completely gray. Over 10 gray ribbons of light lit up behind him, and a black longsword silently appeared in his hand. The scabbard of the longsword was engraved with 7 gray gems that shone with a special radiance. Yamu raised the Athena's spear in her hand. This day had finally arrived. Although she knew that it would come sooner or later, she still couldn't help but feel a little nervous when she was facing a powerhouse like Hades. This time, after she returned to Earth from the divine realm, the God Emperor had decided that she would be in complete control of her own power. She would no longer have a portion of the goddess Athena's spiritual imprint in her body, which would allow her to jointly control this body. She didn't know why, but before she left the divine realm, Yamu suddenly felt indignant. This was because she suddenly thought that if the divine realm had made the same decision when she had obtained the power of Athena's inheritance, why would she have made a fuss with Chiyu? Why would she have harmed Chiyu? It was because of Athena's spiritual imprint that affected her heart. The conflict in her heart. Her soul had almost been torn apart. However, it was also because of this that her soul had been greatly tempered, and she had become the one who had the best integration with the gods in the history of Greece. Otherwise, the divine realm wouldn't have handed everything over to her. Just as Hades had said, she was just a human who had inherited divine power. However, as a human who had inherited divine power, she was no longer inferior to the goddess Athena in terms of true strength. The hair of the goddess of victory slowly rose in front of her chest, and the sharp tip of the spear pointed at her enemy. Yamu's gaze had already become completely sharp. At this moment, there was only fighting spirit in her heart. She was filled with fighting spirit. She had already seen the situation in the United States. The appearance of the netherworld was even more dangerous than the appearance of hell. Their netherworld aura was the most terrifying plague. If they were allowed to occupy Earth, then the original creatures on Earth would completely become walking corpses. Because of them, the longer they delayed, the more netherworld aura would spread, and the greater the harm it would bring to Earth. Therefore, after obtaining the exact location of the netherworld's appearance, she rushed over as fast as she could and stopped the Netherworld's advance at the edge of Kansas. At this moment, the American army was stationed 100 miles behind. However, for the sake of the civilians of Kansas, the American army absolutely could not act rashly. In the face of a combination like the Netherworld, only a true powerhouse could solve the problem. Yama knew that she could only rely on herself now. She didn't even dare to hope that Chiyu would come to help. She knew very well. She knew what position she held in Chiyu's heart. When Yamu stabbed out with her spear for the first time, there was already a hint of despair on her pretty face. The determination to die made her raise her strength to an unprecedented height. A perfectly straight golden light. That's right, a perfectly straight golden light. It completely fused with her body. In the next moment, that golden figure had already arrived in front of the Nether King Hades. Ding! A soft sound rang out from afar. The grayish-white light and the golden light merged and separated. Hades was still floating in place, and Yamu had already returned to her original place. Hades' left hand was still holding onto his Hell King's sword, as if the sword had never been unsheathed. However, the gray energy on his body had completely turned into a grayish-white. The energy belt on his back was suddenly released, crazily absorbing the energy in the air, replenishing his consumption. On the surface, it seemed to be a tie again. However, this time, Hades was the one who had the upper hand. His view of Yamu was disdainful. He absolutely didn't believe that a human could become a true god after inheriting the energy of a god. Therefore, although he felt that Yamu's divine power was very pure, he didn't care too much, and he didn't even treat Yamu as a real enemy. However, just now, when the golden spear was in front of him, Hades suddenly realized that he was wrong. The tip of Athena's spear was only fully released when it was in front of him. The tyrannical divine power was filled with destructive divine power, and it even evoked his memories in the divine realm. The Hell King's sword was instantly unsheathed. The grayish-white body of the sword was instantly pierced by Athena's spear. Yamu's body was forcefully pushed back by him, but the sharp divine power also penetrated his body in an instant. Yamu's valiance was far beyond Hades' expectations. Although Yamu was also being attacked by the Netherworld aura, she had been charging at full speed when she attacked just now. Under the influence of the momentum and the fighting spirit in her heart, she was able to unleash 120% of her strength. Therefore, Hades had already suffered some minor injuries from her spear attack. Although Yamu had been sent flying, she didn't suffer any major injuries. It seems like I have still underestimated you, human. However, I won't make the same mistake twice. As he spoke, Hades' right hand grasped the hilt of the Hell King's sword tightly and slowly drew the 5-foot-long sword out of its scabbard. A grayish-white light descended on the human world. At least 1,000 American citizen souls were sucked dry in an instant, and their bodies immediately turned into dried corpses. The Hell King's sword glowed with a cold white light that was filled with a deathly stillness. As the white light shone on Hades' body, his aura became even more mysterious and powerful. The scabbard in his left hand transformed into a shield with 7 gray gems on it. The shield wasn't very big. Compared to Yamu's Athena shield, it didn't even cover 1/10 of the area. It was just a very small shield. However, this shield seemed to contain energy that wasn't inferior to the Hell King's sword. Hades moved. His body instantly rose to an unprecedented level. This time, he didn't want to give Yamu another chance. Hades moved. His body rose to an unprecedented level in a split second. This time, he didn't want to give Rain-Eye another chance. Every time the massive energy clashed in the air, a dazzling radiance would appear. Every time the massive energy clashed in the air, a dazzling radiance would appear. At this point, even Yamu couldn't care less about protecting the humans below. She knew very well that she would die under the Hell King's sword if she relaxed even a little. When that time came, even more humans would die in front of Hades and his underlings' Dark Earth generals. Therefore, she couldn't lose. She definitely couldn't lose. The 12 Constellation Guardians remained in their original positions and didn't move. At this point, they had already activated their constellation defense. However, under the effect of the 9-star alignment, their constellation defense could no longer provide as much energy as it used to. Therefore, they needed to occupy this domain formation to better condense their divine power. They needed to condense their strength in this world of darkness. The 30 netherworld generals who came with Hades were absolutely blind in their trust in Hades. They also formed a circular formation. Massive gray air currents were released from every netherworld general's body, forming a gray vortex. The evil aura from their bodies became stronger and stronger. The battle between the goddess of war and wisdom and the netherworld king was a battle between core gods. No one else could interfere, at least not the constellation guardians and netherworld generals present. They could only watch as the grayish-white and golden energy clashed in the air. The battle between Yamu and Hades would decide the final victor. Boom! The final collision didn't separate them. Grayish-white and golden. The two colors of light instantly blossomed in the air. With them, as the starting point, an unknown amount of the ground collapsed. The light gradually retracted, and the two figures completely froze in mid-air. Yamu's Athena spear stabbed heavily into the shield in Hades' left hand. The sharp tip of the spear seemed to have pierced through the shield. This was because drops of gray liquid were dripping from Hades' left hand. It seemed to be his fresh blood. Hades' Hell King's sword was completely blocked by Yamu's Athena shield. However, a layer of cracks had already appeared in the center of Athena's shield. It was even being corroded by a layer of gray air currents. Their gazes collided at close range. They didn't give way at all. Their divine power was also continuously increasing to the point where it could explode at any time. As if they had agreed on it, the energy of the two gods from Greece completely exploded at the same time. A huge energy wave appeared once again, and their bodies shot out like cannonballs. The huge energy wave lasted for a full 10 minutes before it gradually stopped. Yamu's chest heaved up and down, showing her unstable breathing. She had already put away her Athena shield, and her face looked a little pale. Although Hades wasn't gasping for breath like Yamu, his gaze was fixed on his left hand. Looking at his pierced left hand that was dripping with gray blood, his face revealed a trace of strange expression. How many years has it been? How many years has it been since I've been hurt like this? Last time it was also you. In the divine realm, it was also you who brought me this kind of pain. This time it is still you. It seems that as a human, you have reached the peak of humanity. Not bad. You are already qualified to be my opponent. Yamu lightly swung the Athena spear in her hand and shook her head. You are wrong. Not only have I become your opponent, but I will also be the one to defeat you. Moreover, you're also wrong about one thing. I have not reached the peak of humanity. Among the humans, there is someone stronger than me. Hades was stunned for a moment. Are you talking about that Pope? No, I don't believe it. Although I have left the divine realm, I still don't believe that a representative of the heavenly realm can be compared to the gods of the divine realm. That is impossible. Do you want to tarnish the gods you have inherited? No, I will definitely not belittle myself. I'm not talking about the Pope. At this point, Yamu's eyes revealed a trace of sadness. The person I'm talking about is from the east of the earth. He is the true expert. If I am not wrong, at this moment, Satan's real opponent is him. Hades, you and Satan will not succeed if you want to invade the human world. As long as that person is here, you will definitely not succeed. Maybe he will not help me, but even if you destroy me, your final outcome will not change. Hades' expression changed. Of course, he knew that a powerful existence like Yamu would definitely not lie. She actually said that there was a human stronger than her. Then, was that human someone he could deal with? Retreat. A cold word came out of Hades' mouth. The gray figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Yamu did not give chase. She only quietly floated in place. When Hades' aura completely disappeared, her delicate body suddenly stiffened. Then, she opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of golden red blood. Her delicate body floated down and returned to the center of the 12 constellation guardians. Miss, how are you? Yamu's condition shocked everyone. Yamu sighed and said, I am fine. Hades' condition is not better than mine. However, it was only because he underestimated me at the beginning that he was injured by me first. In terms of strength, I am still inferior to him. Looks like our battles will become more and more difficult. Now, I can only hope that the battle in hell will end soon. At that time, the underworld will not be a threat. Satan once again stood on the walls of Hell City. This time, the Hell-Burning Legion would no longer be probing their attacks. Ever since the clash with Chi-Yu, the entire Burning Hell Legion did not move for an entire day. And at this moment, the Burning Hell Legion's green flames had already lit up the surroundings of Hell City. Chapter 3:25. Chi-Yu stood at the forefront of the human allied forces. Under his suggestion, the European Union's allied forces had retreated another 30 miles, and all the mechanized troops were ready for battle. At this time, the first batch of silver weapons had arrived. Although the number was far from enough, at least the allied forces had a certain level of strength. Beside Chi-Yu was Pope Marty. He deliberately stayed half a step behind Chi-Yu to show his respect for Chi-Yu. The 4 red-robed archbishops and the clergy of the Holy See were standing behind them. At this moment, the dejected aura on Malty's body had been swept away, and his holiness had reappeared. Furthermore, he seemed to be much stronger than the last time he faced Satan. "Mr. Chi, they're coming," Marty said softly. Chi nodded and did not reply. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to accept the new energy so quickly." Chi glanced at Marty and said calmly, "You should know that I didn't do that to help you. I just don't want the civilians of the West to suffer any more losses. War is cruel. We must end the war as small as possible." Yes, I understand," Marty answered hurriedly. Chi glanced at him. "At the same time, you have to remember that if you don't use your power where it should be used in the future battles, I can also help you lose the power you gain." Marty's expression changed. Behind him, Cardinal Parker immediately shouted angrily, "Chi, are you threatening us?" Chi smiled faintly and said, "Think whatever you want. If you say it's a threat, then so be it." "You enough." Parker, step down, Marty said in a low voice. "Mr. Chi, no matter what misunderstandings we had in the past, we shouldn't settle them now. Don't worry, after this battle is over, when the sun shines on the earth again, I will definitely give you an explanation for what happened in the past." Chi looked at Marty in surprise. "You want to give me an explanation? All right, then I'll wait and see what kind of explanation you can give me." Malty didn't say anything else. His gaze shifted to the advancing green ocean. Chi said, "Stand here and ask all the clerics to raise their holy light to the most powerful level, but don't act rashly and don't attack without my permission. Now is not the time for you to risk your lives." As he spoke, Chi strode forward. Facing the Burning Legion, he walked forward. As he moved forward, layers of green light lit up on his body, and the energy aura began to become more and more tyrannical. Satan saw Chi from afar. Compared to the Burning Legion's 500,000-strong army, the holy army of the Church could only be described as pathetically small. Even if the weaker ones were to be gathered here, their numbers would not exceed 5,000. After all, the Vatican had never had an army in the past. A faint light flickered, and Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of a strange light. His voice spread across the entire battlefield. "Satan, are you really not going to give up? I'll give you one last chance." Upon hearing Chi-Yu's voice, Ling'er was the first to react. Although she already knew that Chi-Yu had come to the battlefield, when she heard Chi-Yu's voice, she could not help but have mixed feelings. This man, why must he stand on the opposite side of hell? Ling'er liked Chi-Yu very much. There was no doubt about it. However, she was also the princess of hell. Even if Satan did not give her a death order, when faced with the future of hell, she would not stand on Chi-Yu's side. Ling'er slowly lowered her head, and a helpless and complicated light flickered in her eyes. Satan snorted coldly, and the 12 wings on his back lit up with that dark red light again. "You're the one who is stubborn. Chi-Yu, do you really think that you can resist my Burning Legion with your own strength? No matter how strong a person's strength is, it's still limited. Even if I estimate you to the highest level, with me and Lucifer taking action to tie you down and destroy you, My burning legion can still flatten the entire human world. Do you believe me? Chi laughed. Satan, who told you that I'm alone? I don't think I've ever said that. Satan was stunned. He glanced at the holy legion behind Chi and said disdainfully, relying on them? They're just a group of cannon fodder. Not to mention that their battle strength is far from being comparable to my burning legion. Even if their strength is equal, there are only a few thousand people. It's not enough to pose a threat to the entire battlefield. Chi shook his head and said, No, you're wrong. In a real war, quantity is not the key to determining victory or defeat. Quantity alone is not enough. Quality is also needed. As soon as he said that, the entire Burning Legion was instantly enraged. None of the hell creatures of the Burning Legion were kind. Chiyu's words had completely infuriated them. For a moment, angry shouts could be heard one after another. If it wasn't for the fact that Satan's prestige was enough to intimidate the entire hell, perhaps someone would have already rushed out to attack Chiyu. Satan laughed. Chiyu, you're really a stinky and hard rock. Since you're not willing to admit it, then we'll speak with our strength. Don't you have a powerful partner? Summon that guy. Chiyu naturally knew that he was talking about the Demon Bull King. At the same time, he also understood that Satan was actually very afraid of the Demon Bull King appearing. However, Chiyu knew that Old Bull was suffering. Ever since Old Bull had helped him complete 3 tasks, he couldn't possibly ask Old Bull to do anything else. Although Chiyu was somewhat confident that Old Bull might help him if he begged him, the dignity of the Zodiac King did not allow him to do that. However, the dignity of the Zodiac King did not allow him to do that. At the same time, he completely believed that he would definitely be able to stop the Burning Hell Legion with his own strength. Zodiac Army, get into formation. With a loud shout, Chiyu's body floated up into the air. The black Kirin armor appeared on his body without any warning. At his current level, he no longer needed the help of a celestial phenomenon. In an instant, he could expand his original form to its most powerful level. A 5-colored light shone from Chiyu's body, illuminating the surrounding darkness. Following a long howl, a huge pressure was suddenly released from the 5-colored light. Chiyu's eyes had already turned completely silver at this moment. He could clearly feel the immense power contained within the 5-colored light. 12 silhouettes appeared from the 5-colored light. They were 12 men and women of different heights. They appeared directly below Chiyu. They were the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors. Each of their auras seemed to be completely different from before. The huge energy waves were released from their bodies. The 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors represented the strongest guardians of the East. They were Chiyu's companions and the ultimate power of the East. Ever since they entered the 5 elements domain of the Kongtong Seal and started cultivating, they had never appeared before. It was only when they received instructions from Chiyu's soul power that they made preparations. Then, 120 figures quietly appeared behind the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors. No more, no less. Behind each of them were 10 people. Huge energy waves were also released from their bodies. Every one of their eyes shone with a strong light. A monstrous fighting spirit filled the air. Under the leadership of the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, the Zodiac Army shouted in unison. Although there were only 100 of them, in that instant, their voices completely overshadowed the shouts of the entire Burning Legion. Shang Bing, Snow Girl, and the Plant Soul quietly appeared beside the Zodiac Guardian Warriors. Their expressions also changed. That was a powerful change. Their auras, mist of different attributes, formed around their bodies. The increase in energy had raised them to a whole new level. Satan's pupils shrank when he saw the Zodiac Army. How could he not feel the power of the Zodiac Army? Every single one of them was a powerful force. Every one of them represented the ultimate power of mankind, especially the 12 people standing at the front. It was also emitting a massive energy fluctuation that shocked even him. The Zodiac Army raised their heads and focused their gazes on Chiyu. Their eyes were burning. Chiyu could clearly feel the surging fighting spirit in their hearts. A faint smile appeared on Chiyu's face. Brothers and sisters, as the saying goes, soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single day. Today, when we face the enemies from hell, it is time for us to unleash our power. Let these creatures from hell see the power of the Zodiac army. Let them understand why the flowers are so red. Come to me. Chi Yu's eyes lit up. In an instant, he had already rushed to the front and was heading in the direction of Satan, Lucifer, and Lumiere. Pope Marty was dumbfounded as he watched the Zodiac army scatter and rush forward. He could not understand how Chi Yu had released the Zodiac army. However, Chi Yu did not order them to attack, so he could only wait patiently. The iron-blooded aura released by the Zodiac army also spread to the clergy of the Sacred Army. They suddenly realized that the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers in front of them did not seem so scary anymore. Deep in their hearts, they felt a strong desire to fight. The holy energy in their bodies also began to condense faster. Chi Yu flew very quickly. He was not worried about the Zodiac army soldiers. The battle had begun. Right now, he only had Satan, Lucifer, and Lumiere in his eyes. They were the strongest members of the Hell Army. At the same time, they were also Chi Yu's targets. A silver light shone from Chi Yu's body. In a few seconds, he had already arrived in front of Satan. Satan, we meet again. Why don't we start now? Seeing Chi Yu's unruffled appearance, Satan's heart was filled with anger. Ever since he had met this brat, he seemed to be angered even more easily. Furthermore, he had brought hell an unprecedented humiliation. However, this time, Satan did not act impulsively. He just snorted coldly and said, "Are you in a hurry? How about this? Chi Yu, let's make a bet, shall we?" Chi Yu smiled calmly. "Oh, a dignified ruler of hell wants to bet with me? Did I hear wrongly?" Satan's eyes flashed, and he said, "Aren't you very confident in your companions? All right, I'll give you a chance. I'm here, and so is Lucifer. Lumiere, the three of us should be enough to take on one of you. That's my highest estimate of you. Why don't we just watch from here without interfering? Let's see how our subordinates fight. We'll also let you see the true power of the Burning Legion." Looking at the flickering demonic light in Satan's eyes, Chi Yu could not help but feel puzzled. Why did Satan want to do this? There was no reason. Not to mention Lumiere. Even if it was just him and Lucifer, it would be very difficult for him to deal with them. Actually, Satan did not want to fight with Chi Yu at this time. In terms of quantity and quality, he believed that his Burning Legion was absolutely invincible on Earth. However, as the ruler of hell, he had no choice but to put Chi Yu in the position of his most powerful enemy. In fact, he had already developed some feelings of fear towards Chi Yu. In addition, there was also the deterrence of the Bull Demon King that had yet to appear. If the Burning Legion won, but he was defeated by Chi Yu, or even killed by him, then what was the meaning of the Burning Legion's victory? Even if he did not die, if he was seriously injured, it would inevitably affect the invasion of Earth in the future. Therefore, Satan was now willing to make Chi Yu's power a mere figurehead. At the same time, he was also willing to show the power of the Burning Legion in front of Chi Yu. "What's the bet?" Chi Yu asked. Satan snorted coldly and said, "It's very simple. If your people can persist under the attack of the Burning Legion for an hour, then I cannot launch an attack for the next 5 days. I'll give you more time to prepare. If you lose, then you have to surrender to me and swear your loyalty to me." What a joke, what a joke. Your Majesty, Satan, then why don't you swear your loyalty to me after we persist for an hour? That's obviously not fair. You? Satan's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Chi Yu as if his gaze was about to burn. However, Chi Yu looked at Lumiere meaningfully and said, "For Lumiere's sake, let's not make a bet. 500,000 against 130 people. If my companions break through your battle formation, then you're not allowed to leave Hell City for the next 5 days. Otherwise, I'll leave immediately and no longer care about your battle with the Western countries. How about it?" Satan looked at Chi Yu in shock. "What did you say? Breakthrough? You're not daydreaming, right? Although I can see that your companions have some strength, if you say that they can break through my Burning Legion's battle formation of 500,000 with just 100 people, then I don't need to show my face anymore." Chi Yu laughed mischievously and said, "Your Majesty Satan, don't speak too confidently. Why don't you let us continue watching? I'm very confident in the strength of my companions. I believe that you should also have confidence in your subordinates. Satan looked at Chi Yu and nodded coldly. He said, "All right, then I'll bet with you this time. Let's see whose subordinates are stronger." Chi Yu smiled and did not say anything. He directly turned his gaze to the battlefield below, as if he was not at all worried that Satan and Lucifer would sneak up on him. Looking at Chi Yu's calm appearance, the confidence in Satan's heart could not help but be slightly shaken. Could it be that his subordinates could really break through the Burning Legion's battle formation? No, that was absolutely impossible. He immediately denied this thought. At this time, the battle below had really begun. The 12 Zodiac Guardian God warriors all had cold expressions on their faces. At the same time, their bodies were also burning with different colors of light. Ryue let out a long roar and suddenly soared into the sky. She rushed out at the fastest speed. Through Chi Yu's spiritual force transmission, she already knew the bet between Chi Yu and Satan. Facing the endless army of 500,000 people, she did not have the slightest worry in her heart. She was also full of confidence in her companions, just like Chi Yu. In an instant, the light bloomed. Ryue almost instantly rushed into the Burning Legion's camp. Crystal white light, accompanied by a powerful dragon roar, directly exploded. Huge energy fluctuations instantly increased. With a loud bang, a 100-meter-long gully appeared below her. Ryu's hands had already swung out, dragon wings chasing stars. Accompanied by countless white light spots, the Burning Legion spread out towards the most densely packed place of the Burning Legion. The Burning Legion began to move. Even Chi Yu had to admit that they were elite. As many as 500,000 people had entered a state of battle, but they did not seem to be scattered at all. At the forefront were the powerful warriors of the Burning Legion, whose bodies were like stones. Countless black fog had already spread out, covering the Zodiac Guardian God army. In their eyes, the number of more than 100 people was just a result of an instant overturn. But was that really the case? As Ryue launched her attack, the Zodiac Guardian God army also moved out. Every single one of them. They all released special energy fluctuations. Relying on their tyrannical strength, they directly rushed into the battle formation in front of them. Boom! In an instant, the Zodiac Guardian God army had already been swallowed up by the steel torrent of the Burning Legion. More than 100 people in front of 500,000 people. They were really too small. Only Ryue's white figure was still shining in the sky. At this time, she was also surrounded by 10 black generals on both sides. Satan snorted disdainfully. "See? This is the result." Chi Yu smiled slightly and said, "If there is nothing wrong with your eyes, please take a look again." Satan was stunned and once again turned his gaze to the battlefield. At this moment, something strange had happened. Almost in an instant, balls of light exploded from the Burning Legion's formation. Every explosion of light took at least 10 lives of the Burning Legion's warriors. The tyrannical energy fluctuations suddenly collided with the Burning Legion's dark aura. A large amount of turbulent energy burst out. "Summon." Ryue's cold voice instantly rang out. That's right, the Zodiac Legion was absolutely powerful. However, she also didn't think that with their strength alone, they could charge through the Burning Legion's army of 500,000. A golden light lit up, covering a large area. Then, the 120 Zodiac warriors of the Zodiac Legion rose into the air at the same time. Their special abilities were completely unleashed at this moment. It was as if energy balls had been released in an instant, exploding within the Burning Legion. Then, loud and clear bird cries rang out in midair. The Golden Rock Eagle appeared. Every Zodiac Guardian God soldier appeared on the back of their own Golden Rock Eagle. Countless gusts of wind lit up because of the appearance of the Golden Rock Eagle. Their huge wings were like incomparably sharp blades gliding in the air, and in an instant, a large area of the Burning Legion's camp was empty. It was too sudden. Everything happened too suddenly. How could the Burning Legion's hell creatures compare to the golden-winged Rock Eagle, which was one of the most powerful ancient beasts? Unless it was the black generals with 4 wings or above, the other hell creatures simply couldn't fight against it. As for the four-winged black generals, Chi-Yu had practically killed all of them in hell last time. Only a small portion of them remained. The might of the Golden Rock Eagle army was displayed for the first time. Their tyrannical strength finally caused the neat formation of the Burning Legion to finally become chaotic. Wolf flew at the front. The Little Rock's tyrannical strength became the sharp blade of the Golden Rock Eagle army. Everywhere it passed, it was invincible. Not a single hell creature could stop its advance. The Golden Torrent suddenly flew forward about 5 meters from the ground, forming a triangular formation. Soon, a gap was opened in the Burning Legion's formation. At least 1,000 Burning Legion soldiers were destroyed in this wave of attack. Satan's expression changed. He had never seen a creature as tyrannical as the Golden Rock Eagle. However, at this moment, the elites of the Burning Legion were completely revealed. Tens of thousands of hell demon mages released their power of darkness at the same time. Like a black cloud, it shrouded the Golden Rock Eagle. It was an aura filled with all sorts of negative energy. Once enveloped, all sorts of negative energy, such as corrosion, chaos, and aging would erupt. Tens of thousands of hell demon mages released a large-scale attack. Even Chi-Yu, who was watching the battle from midair, couldn't help but change his expression. Although the Burning Legion was shocked by the sudden attack, they didn't panic. They made the most correct response in the shortest time possible. They were indeed the elites of the elites. Although the golden-winged Great Pung Eagle was powerful, Chi-Yu knew that it would become everyone's target the moment it took to the skies. It was impossible for the Burning Legion to not have any long-range attackers. At this moment, the situation was still unclear. Now, Chi-Yu only hoped that the time they spent cultivating in the Kong Tong Seal would give the Zodiac Legion soldiers a qualitative change. He didn't move. He believed in his companions. He also believed that under Ryu's leadership, his companions would definitely not fail. At this moment, a dragon's roar exploded from Ryu's mouth. The 10-winged black general warriors who had been surrounding her were sent flying at almost the same time, blood spurting from their mouths. Their bodies were actually shattered by Ryu's powerful dragon thundercloud force in midair. Large amounts of blood splattered in all directions. Ryu's body was already covered with the second layer of elemental mutation armor. Her dragon power was continuously increasing at a terrifying rate. She could only watch as the huge black cloud shrouded her. With a burst of speed, she had already rushed forward. The area covered by the black cloud was too large. Even if it was the Golden Rock Eagle, it would not be able to escape in such a short period of time. So, now, she could only face it. And the one he faced was not the Golden Rock Eagle, but Ryu. That's right, she was alone. A clear and resonant dragon's roar came from Ryu's mouth. Her eyes had now completely turned into a pair of sapphires. The tyrannical energy undulations caused the air around her to completely distort. The white light around her body had now completely turned into a deep blue. This was the first time, even for Chi-Yu had seen such a situation. What was Ryu going to do? Was she going to rely on her own strength to resist a volley of attacks from the infernal demon sorcerers? Chi-Yu's hands were already clenched tightly. If Ryu was in any danger, he would definitely disregard the bet and rush forward. Ryu's breath seemed to be very stable under her tough order. Under her unyielding command, Vol sat on the Little Rock's back and led the Golden Rock Eagle Legion and the 120 members of the Zodiac squad to change their formation, charging in the other direction of the Burning Legion. A dark blue light, like an ocean, it spread over Ryu's body. Her face looked very cold, and the dragon scales on her body began to spread along with the dark blue light. The resonant dragon's roar never stopped, and it seemed to be getting louder and louder. The huge dragon power became more and more tyrannical. It was tyrannical enough to make the two peerless powerhouses, Chi-Yu and Satan, feel threatened. Chi-Yu's heart suddenly moved, and he thought pleasantly surprised. Could it be that Ryu has already? Ryu used her actions to prove that Chi-Yu's guess was completely correct. The dark blue light spread the moment the black cloud arrived and completely enveloped Ryue's body. Then, the huge black cloud stirred violently, and the energy light scattered in all directions. In just a moment, it seemed that the black cloud actually seemed to have stopped. The dark blue light appeared again, accompanied by an even more intense dragon's roar. This time, the area covered by the dark blue light had reached a terrifying extent. A dragon that was more than 100 meters long suddenly appeared in midair. It was the form of an Easter dragon, but on her back there was a pair of huge dragon wings that were more than 100 meters wide. The sapphire-like eyes and the huge dragon power fluctuations were enough to prove her identity. That's right, it was Ryue's divine dragon transformation. Naturally, Chiyu had seen Ryue's divine dragon transformation before. But at this moment, Ryue was no longer using the ordinary divine dragon transformation. Under the cover of the black cloud, what she used was not only the divine dragon transformation, which could raise her abilities to the limit, but also the third stage of her own attribute mutation. In other words, our Zodiac warrior has finally broken through the bottleneck. She has reached the peak of the Zodiac warrior, 9 clouds. That's right, it was the 9-cloud divine dragon transformation. In the past, the 9-cloud divine dragon transformation meant that the Zodiac warrior had transformed into a dragon. Because they had inherited the bloodline of the ancient divine beast, the green dragon. The divine dragon they transformed into was naturally the green dragon of the 4 sacred beasts. However, Ryue was different from the previous Zodiac dragon warriors. Not only did she have the bloodline of the green dragon, but she also had the bloodline of the Western legendary dragon clan. This made her even more terrifying than the previous Zodiac dragon warriors after she reached the 9-cloud divine dragon realm. The dark blue scale armor emitted surging energy waves. Not to mention the attack power, just the strong defense and the dark blue dragon aura that she released were enough to make the black cloud released by the tens of thousands of hell fiend mages unable to harm her. After all, although the other party had the advantage in numbers, their attacks were too scattered. Satan stared at the 100-meter-long dragon, dumbfounded. With his strength, how could he not sense the formidable power that the dragon was releasing? At this very moment, he finally understood why Chiyu was so confident that his 100 or so subordinates would be able to penetrate his 500,000 burning legion. However, the situation had developed to such an extent that even he could not control it anymore. Now, he could only rely on the powerful troops of the burning legion. Very quickly, Ryue showed the hell creatures how terrifying she was. The explosive energy almost instantly set off a huge whirlwind. As the saying went, the wind followed the tiger, and the clouds followed the dragon. The black cloud was also a cloud. The huge energy that was filled with all sorts of negative auras was driven by the dark blue dragon power that Ryue emitted. In an instant, it broke free from the control of the fiend mages. The long dragon roar came to an abrupt end. In the next moment, Ryue's sapphire eyes suddenly turned white. Later on, everyone found out that when the dragon's eyes turned white, it meant that Ryue had raised her dragon power to the limit. That's right, it was the limit. The huge dragon body brought along the huge black cloud and directly pounced on the enemies below. Behind the burning legion, the long-range attacks released by the countless powerhouses of hell were repelled by the extremely powerful dragon power before they could reach Ryue. In a situation where she had raised her dragon power to the limit, Ryue's true strength had even reached the level of Lucifer, the 8-winged Lucifer. How could the strength that the Zodiac Dragon Warrior's third attribute mutation compare to before? The negative energy made the Burning Legion suffer the consequences of their own actions almost instantly. The huge black cloud covered at least 30,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion. Chapter 3:26. Chiyu frowned slightly. In fact, even he didn't understand what Ryue was trying to do. With Ryue's intelligence, there was no way she wouldn't be able to tell that the dark energy wouldn't have much of an impact on the Burning Legion. At this time, she was alone. Once she was entangled by the other party's powerhouses, it would be difficult for her to break free. Although that was what he thought, Chiyu naturally wouldn't lose to Satan in words. He snorted coldly and said, "Then you just wait and see. I think Ryue will give you a surprise. Perhaps I should introduce to you that this powerful warrior who is transformed into a dragon is one of my wives, the dragon warrior of the 12 Zodiac guardian gods. Apart from me, she is also the most powerful of the 12 Zodiac warriors." Hearing the words, one of his wives, Satan and Lungier's gazes at Chiyu changed almost at the same time. At this time, Ryue had already given her answer. She had used facts to prove that Chiyu's trust in her was completely correct. That's right, the corrosive fog wouldn't have much of an impact on the Burning Hell Legion. However, as soon as she came into contact with this huge dark energy, Ryue discovered that this huge dark energy was actually semi-liquid and extremely sticky. When used in an attack, as long as it stuck to the opponent's body, it would be very difficult to get rid of it. This was also the strength of this kind of dark attack. But now, Ryue had completely used this strong stickiness. With a dark cloud shrouded, more than 30,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion were shrouded by the huge black cloud. The huge energy almost instantly stuck all the hell creatures' bodies. Although the black cloud wouldn't affect them, and they only needed to assimilate it with the dark energy, the hell creatures' bodies were completely glued to the black cloud. It wouldn't take too long for them to dissolve it. However, would Ryue give them that kind of time? Dragon God Domain break. 5 cold words came out of Ryue's huge dragon mouth. Her gigantic body that was floating in midair suddenly stopped. Her body violently swung in a circle, and dozens of experts from hell who had surrounded her were instantly sent flying. It seemed that they would not survive. It raised its 2 huge front claws, and a special energy fluctuation suddenly appeared all over the dragon's body. With Ryue's body as the center, the space within a radius of several hundred square meters completely calmed down. The dark blue scales on her body turned milky white in an instant. Tyrannical energy fluctuations soared into the sky. Chiyu, Lucifer, and Satan were all too familiar with that kind of aura. That's right, Ryue used her divine dragon transformation body to forcefully tear the space apart. Seeing this scene, Chiyu and Satan's expressions changed dramatically at the same time. Of course, their emotions were completely opposite. A huge black hole appeared out of thin air in front of Ryue's huge dragon body. The black hole didn't seem to have any effect on Ryue. But at this moment, Ryue let out a fierce roar towards the sky. Then, the distorted light rapidly expanded within the range of the black cloud, causing the entire black cloud to distort. Domain. That was the power of a domain. After reaching the 9th cloud level, Ryue finally understood her domain as a Zodiac dragon warrior. Black holes were the king of devouring. They could even devour light. Although a man-made black hole couldn't compare to the black holes in the universe, it was absolutely terrifying when used on the battlefield. Lucifer and Satan almost immediately understood what Ryue was doing. Their bodies rushed down at almost the same time, pouncing towards the black hole. At this time, after releasing the Dragon God Domain, Ryue seemed to be on the verge of collapse. She instantly canceled the divine dragon transformation and returned to her human form. Relying on her wings, she flew up high. Satan and Lucifer didn't care about Ryue at all. The black hole below was their target. However, could they really succeed? The answer was of course no. Chiyu wasn't a dead man. Wind on the left and lightning on the right. Chiyu used a speed that even Satan couldn't see clearly to block in front of them in an instant. Please keep your promise and go back. Wind was the wind of destruction filled with souls. Lightning was the righteous lightning of heaven and earth that specialized in restraining hell creatures. The vast energy of the earth swept up in an instant. Even when facing Lucifer and Satan, the 2 super experts of hell, Chiyu still chose to face them head-on. A loud bang suddenly appeared in midair. 3 figures shot out in different directions at the same time. Chiyu let out a muffled groan. The energy fluctuations on his body clearly weakened a little. 1 against 2, and it was a head-on collision without any fancy moves. After all, he still suffered a little. However, for him, this short period of time was enough. Satan and Lucifer no longer had the chance to stop the dragon god domain from erupting. The black hole, incomparably terrifying, devouring power, manifested under his feet. Even Chi-Yu, who was in midair, could clearly feel the terrifying, devouring power released by the black hole. In an instant, everything within thousands of square meters was swept away. At the same time, the stickiness of Hell's corrosive fog played an important role. Under the lock-on of the dragon god domain, coupled with the corrosive fog's strong stickiness, the black cloud was frantically sucked in by the black hole. All the Hell creatures within the range of the black cloud were directly sucked into the black hole along with the black cloud. The result didn't need to be explained. Everyone knew what it meant to be sucked into the black hole. Almost in an instant, a large empty space appeared on the entire battlefield. Moreover, it was a large empty space that no one dared to set foot in. The 30,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion were completely devoured in an instant. Even though these new soldiers of the Burning Legion had just been recruited by Satan before he came to Earth, it still meant that this was 1% of the entire Burning Legion's combat power. Satan's eyes were completely red. The disappearance of 30,000 subordinates proved how powerful Ryue was. It also made his hatred for these humans in front of him reach its peak. When he saw the mocking glint in Chi-Yu's eyes, he charged forward almost instantly. Chi-Yu snorted coldly. 4 types of thundercloud force erupted from his body at the same time. In an instant, 4 types of elemental energy erupted in midair. It was about to engulf Satan's attack. Wait a minute. Lucifer's voice suddenly sounded. He pulled Satan back, but due to his strength, the difference. His body was brought 100 meters away by Satan before he stopped. This was with Satan controlling his own energy. The difference between 12 wings and 8 wings was huge. Mr. Chi, I'm sorry. We were anxious just now. I think we should continue with our bet, Lucifer said to Chi-Yu in a low voice. Ever since he was defeated by Chi-Yu, he had become much gloomier. However, he was no longer as impulsive as before. After all, in the absence of absolute strength, wisdom was the most correct choice. Satan glared at Lucifer, but he saw Lucifer quietly shaking his head at him. Following Lucifer's spiritual aura, Satan looked at his feet and immediately understood what Lucifer meant. In the collision just now, Lucifer, Satan, and Chi-Yu collided. The shockwave produced was naturally full of destruction. Not far from the empty space where the black hole engulfed, there was also a small empty space. And this empty space, it was completely filled with craters. There was not a single soldier of the Burning Legion inside. Needless to say, those soldiers had already been turned into powder by the shockwave in the violent collision. For experts like Satan and Chi-Yu, the moment they truly fought, they would not be able to escape. The destructive power it produced did not only affect them. The Zodiac Legion only had a little more than 100 people. It was a pitifully small target. However, the Burning Legion had sent out 500,000 soldiers this time. Lucifer and Satan both understood that Chi-Yu's destructive power was definitely much more terrifying than that of the giant dragon. Ryue floated in midair. At this time, she had already returned to the square camp. In midair, her chest was heaving up and down, but the domineering look in her eyes was stronger than before. She exchanged glances with Chi-Yu. Both of them could feel the approval in each other's eyes. The battle was still going on. However, at this time, in the hearts of the Burning Legion soldiers, there had already been an earth-shattering change. There were 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors. Although Ryue was the most powerful one, she was definitely not the only powerful one. The Burning Legion naturally saw Ryue's exhaustion. The 3,000 powerhouses that came out of the Valley of Demons had already completely thrown themselves into the battle. Among them, 2 6-winged black generals directly pounced in the direction of Ryue. They obviously wanted to destroy this powerhouse, Ryue, before she recovered her strength to prevent the same situation from happening again. Ryue floated to the ground as if she did not see them at all. A golden light suddenly appeared around her body and completely wrapped her delicate body. The Zodiac guardian warriors were all fighting. At this moment, no one actually came to help Ryue. It was not that they had given up on Ryue, but that each of them had absolute confidence in Ryue. After consuming a large amount of dragon power, it did not mean that Tyrannosaurus Rex did not have the ability to fight anymore. The golden light suddenly gathered, and a figure instantly separated from Ryue's body. It was the appearance of a woman. She had long golden hair, a pale golden face, a gorgeous golden armor, and a pair of golden eyes. There was not a single part of her body that was not golden. Her beauty was actually comparable to Ryu, who was beside her. Ryue stood there without moving. She even closed her eyes. At this moment, the golden beauty that suddenly appeared raised her head. Looking at the two six-winged black generals pouncing down from the sky, she did something that no one would have expected. She took a step forward and stretched her arms to the sides of her body. Then, an extremely violent roar suddenly erupted from her mouth. That's right, it was a roar. Moreover, it was not a simple roar. The deafening sound suddenly rose into the sky like rolling thunder. A huge golden aura almost instantly filled an area of hundreds of square meters. The two six-winged black generals bore the brunt of the impact. Under the impact of the huge energy and the violent sound wave, their bodies were sent flying at the same time. Their eardrums seemed to have ruptured. The only thing they could think of now was to desperately release their own dark energy to protect their bodies. They did not think that the golden beauty below was stronger than them. However, the sudden sound wave did not only damage their bodies, but also their hearing. In desperation, they could only choose to retreat. As for the Burning Legion experts who were rushing towards Ryue on the ground, they were within the range of the sound wave. Almost at the same time, they covered their ears and fell to the ground in pain. The weaker ones directly died with blood flowing out of their 7 orifices. Satan looked at the situation below with his mouth agape and murmured, "What kind of ability is this? Is an attack with a shout?" Even he was not sure if his voice could have such great power. A strange smile appeared at the corner of Chiyu's mouth, and he said, "Your Majesty Satan, I don't know if you've heard of an idiom in the east of the river. It's called the roar of a lion from the east of the river. That's what's coming next." That's right. It was the roar of a lion from the east of the river. Back then, during the era of the ancient beasts, Ryue had received a messenger token. It was received by God Kirin. Her messenger token was a golden lion with a cultivation of close to 20,000 years. During the period of cultivation in the seal, under the joint effect of the 5 elements domain and Chi-Yu's source of nature, Ryue was not the only one who had evolved. The golden lion had finally broken through the bottleneck and reached the level where it could transform into a human form. This golden lion was a female, so the name Roar of a Lion from the East of the River was naturally well-deserved. Golden light flickered and supported Ryue's delicate body. The golden beauty had already disappeared. Just as Chiyu had said, a huge golden lion appeared on the battlefield with Ryue sitting on its back. The combination of a dragon and a lion once again attacked the opponents. Even though she had consumed a lot of energy, how could ordinary people deal with Ryue's tyrannical physical strength alone? Following the lion's roar, another roar was heard. The dark red light instantly engulfed the bodies of hundreds of enemies. Another white figure instantly merged with the black figure, and at the same time, a round of light like the sun burst out. Next, the two figures, one white and one black, rose into the air at the same time. A huge energy fluctuation spread rapidly, and the sun-like light also became more and more intense. Chiyu shouted in midair. "Good." A burning gaze shot out from his eyes. Of course, he could see who the figure in the air was. At the same time, he also understood that Ryue was not the only one who had reached the 9 cloud level. The white figure, the handsome face, the huge and majestic aura. That was Su Dong, the Zodiac tiger warrior Su Dong. And the black figure beside him was a special black tiger. In the era of the ancient beasts, her name was Black Tiger. Her biggest characteristic was that the word king on her forehead was red. as Black Tiger rose into the air with Su Dong. Her huge body that was more than 10 meters long suddenly shrunk and also appeared in front of Su Dong. The beauty, who was covered in black armor, looked at the burning legion soldiers below her with a cold aura, as though she was looking at a group of ants. She and Su Dong held hands, and their auras rose at the same time. Su Dong glanced at the black beauty beside him, and the light in his eyes was exceptionally gentle. When the Mo Jinghu was able to transform into a human form in the Five Elements domain, he was glad that he had made the right choice. Perhaps it was because of the attraction of auras, but ever since he had Black Tiger, Su Dong had changed a lot. The majestic aura that belonged to a tiger was much stronger than before, and the original lascivious aura had quietly disappeared. Holding the hand of the Black Beauty, a loud tiger roar sounded from Su Dong's mouth. After the dragon's roar, how could a tiger's roar be lacking? As one of the first people to become a Zodiac warrior, Su Dong's strength was unquestionable. The sun behind air, who was dark red, and it contained both Su Dong's energy and the Black Beauty's energy. Su Dong and the Black Beauty looked at each other. The two of them nodded at the same time. In the next moment, their bodies had already changed, and they actually threw themselves into the huge dark red sun at the same time. The moment they threw themselves into it, a dazzling light burst out, and a huge energy wave almost swept the entire sky in an instant. In the dark red sun, two huge figures appeared at the same time. They were the black and white tigers. That's right, they were two tigers. Their figures were completely imprinted in the sun's light, and at that moment, the huge aura in the sky made Satan suddenly feel a trace of sorrow. Ryue casually killed an enemy next to her, then raised her head to look at the light in the sky. A faint smile appeared on her cold, pretty face. In terms of cooperation, I'm afraid that Su Dong and his envoy are the best among all of us. So much so that he's even better than me in terms of understanding his domain. He's even better than me. The Golden Lion said indifferently. That's because opposites attract. Actually, I can also merge into your domain, but I'm not a dragon, so I don't have the ability to merge like they do. That's right, Su Dong, who had transformed into a white tiger, had already proved that he had reached the 9-cloud level. The white tiger transformation also symbolized the meaning of his ultimate aura. As for the black tiger beside him, it had completely merged with his aura. At this moment, the figures that they transformed completely lit up the sky. Domain fusion. This could only happen when the two auras were completely the same. Su Dong did it because Mo Jinghu wasn't just his envoy, but also his lover. Satan didn't move this time, because he knew that Chi Yu, who was next to him, wouldn't allow him and Lucifer to interfere. Moreover, even if it was him, even if he blocked that domain, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be injured, and once he was injured, the outcome would be very hard to predict when he fought with Chi Yu again. The original White Tiger domain had been upgraded to the Divine Tiger domain. It was a light like the sun. It represented the power of fire, the unparalleled power of earth fire. In an instant, it was swept clean. The sun shone brightly. The entire Berlin suburbs were completely lit up. Even the incomparably huge Hell City was slightly trembling under the cover of this light. The light illuminated the area, and the green flames on the bodies of at least 150,000 members of the Burning Legion turned dark red. In the next moment, the dark red flames had already started to burn their bodies and souls. It wasn't directly destroyed, but the divine fire in the Divine Tiger domain wouldn't be easily extinguished. Even though the Burning Legion's dark energy was so strong, it couldn't be extinguished in a short time. Then, the only result was that they would burn themselves. The 150,000 Burning Legion soldiers who were enveloped by the light lost more than half of their combat power in an instant, and the pressure on the great golden-winged eagle corps, led by Vol, was greatly reduced. At this moment, as the battle progressed, the members of the 12 Zodiac squad had more or less suffered some injuries. Two huge, white tigers fell from their mouths at the same time, their energy completely restrained. However, how could their bodies, which were more than 10 meters long, be easily resisted? Their huge bodies launched a violent attack on the soldiers of the Burning Legion, and most of their targets were the enemies that had been enveloped by the divine tiger domain. Wherever who went, the flames brought by the divine tiger domain would instantly rise. Although they were also withstanding the powerful attacks of their enemies, their sturdy bodies prevented the experts of the Burning Legion from inflicting any real harm on them, at least in a short period of time. With two loud booms, Ryue and the Golden Lion King retreated at the same time. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of Ryue's mouth, and the energy on the Golden Lion King's body became even more violent. The two six-winged black generals had no intention of letting them go, and Ryue had indeed used up too much of her energy. Although she recovered rather quickly with the help of the natural source energy that Chi-Yu had infused, how could she have time to rest in such an intense battle? A faint light flickered in Chi-Yu's eyes. Ryue was injured, and it was as if he had been stabbed in the heart. If this continued, even with the protection of the Golden Lion King, it would be very difficult for them to fight against the two black generals who had reached the level of a dreadlord. Ryue, why are you so stupid? Hurry up and regroup with everyone. Although we can only unleash the greatest attack power if we spread out, we still have to put your safety first. Just as Chi-Yu was worrying, a loud and clear phoenix cry sounded at almost the same time. Immediately after, a huge figure suddenly appeared on the other side of the battlefield. The huge figure kept expanding, and in just a few blinks of an eye, it had already expanded to a height of more than 100 meters. Its huge body also covered an area of more than 100 square meters, or even more, wherever the huge figure went. No one knew how many enemies were swept away by it. It was not a human, nor was it a beast. It was a tree that was more than 100 meters tall, an ancient giant tree, a chicken warrior, Ji Mingming's command. Even Chi-Yu had never seen an ancient giant tree before. Now that he saw it, he could not help but be dumbfounded. The roots of the ancient giant tree had actually condensed into the shape of two giant feet. They actually condensed into the shape of two huge feet. Tens of thousands of branches waved in the air like huge arms. All the enemies in front of him were swept away by the huge branches. Although the enemies were strong, they were still shaken away by the branches. Although the lethality was not too strong, they were still shaken away. Although the damage was not too strong, it had completely cleared a large area in an instant. The loud and clear phoenix cry came from the tree, and in the next moment, a rainbow-colored light soared into the sky. The dazzling rainbow-colored light kept changing in the air and once again illuminated the entire battlefield. Satan's heart trembled slightly, and he muttered, "It's not over yet. There are actually so many powerhouses among the humans." The previous two blows had already made him feel apprehensive. The strength of Ryue and Su Dong had given him a whole new understanding of the entire Zodiac army. Although the strength of these people was far from Chi-Yu's, it seemed that they had already surpassed the powerhouses of the six-winged black generals under him. If this battle continued, given their formidable strength, they would pose a great threat to the Infernal Realms camp, especially that flock of giant golden birds. Wherever they passed, they would sweep away the powerhouses of the Burning Legion as if they were harvesting wheat. The infernal demon sorcerers who had dared to attack them just now had already been cut in half. At this time, under their strong sweep, their numbers had been reduced by half, and it was impossible for them to use the same corrosive fog to attack them. When he saw Ming Ming's figure, Chi-Yu's eyes lit up, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He thought to himself, "Brothers, you have really brought me too many surprises. Everything you have done is much more perfect than I had imagined." At the same time, his worry for Ryue had completely disappeared. This was because the direction in which Ming Ming had flown towards was where Ryue was. The rainbow-colored light continued to condense in the sky, and Ming Ming's figure could not be seen at all. Suddenly, the rainbow-colored light had two abrupt colors, white and black. The rainbow-colored light instantly turned into a nine-colored light. Immediately after, a massive energy fluctuation rose, and the area enveloped by the nine-colored light expanded to a range of hundreds of meters. A loud and clear phoenix cry soared into the sky. Just like how the Burning Legion had been affected by the lion's roar, more Burning Legion soldiers fell to the ground due to the sharp phoenix cry. The area enveloped was much larger than the Golden Lions. After all, this was one of Ming Ming's special abilities. What was the radiance of a phoenix? Only those who had truly experienced it would understand how powerful a phoenix was. A dragon's power lay in its dominance, while a phoenix's power lay in its aura. That's right, it was its aura. As one of the noblest races, when a phoenix's ability was raised to the peak, it would no longer be a phoenix, but the vermilion bird of the four divine beasts. At this moment, Ming Ming had transformed into the appearance of a vermilion bird. When a massive energy was raised to the limit, the huge body of a phoenix that was 100 meters long suddenly retracted and returned to its original size of about 10 meters. However, the nine-colored light had completely disappeared, and Ming Ming had completely transformed into a phoenix that was completely red in color. This was the true vermilion bird. However, unlike the vermilion bird of the primordial divine beasts, the vermilion bird that Ming Ming had transformed into had an additional strand of silver hair that extended from the top of her head all the way to her back. This made the energy aura on her body seem even more peculiar. This wasn't the power that the vermilion bird originally possessed, but rather, it came from Chiyu's blood. Ming Ming had once been seriously injured, and Chiyu had used his blood to save her. Therefore, the bloodline in her body wasn't just the pure phoenix bloodline. At the same time, it had also fused with a certain amount of Kirin's bloodline. Now that she had truly reached the peak of the chicken Zodiac, the Kirin's bloodline that she had fused with back then was truly effective. The huge wings shone dazzlingly in the sky as the vermilion bird's body flipped in the air, and it dove down like a fighter jet. The intelligent Ming Ming didn't directly use her most powerful energy attack, like Ryue and Su Dong had. This was because she knew that among all the chicken Zodiac warriors, there were actually only 4 who had truly reached the 9-cloud realm. At this moment, both Ryue and Su Dong had already expended a large amount of energy. Although they had already caused great losses to the enemy, it was clearly not enough against a total of 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers. Therefore, if she expended any more energy, she wouldn't be able to save her companions in time if they were in danger. The 2 six-winged black generals suddenly felt a huge pressure in the air, and they didn't dare to attack Ryue anymore. They turned around at the same time to face the vermilion bird that Ming Ming had transformed into. The fiery red light wasn't of the fire attribute, but a special kind of divine power that only belonged to the vermilion bird. Wherever the light passed, the 2 six-winged black generals were sent flying at the same time. Ryue had always been the actual commander of the Zodiac Legion. When she saw this situation, she immediately shouted, "Zodiac guardian gods, get into formation and gather around the ancient tree. With the ancient tree as the center, we'll kill our way over." Without the threat of the 2 six-winged black generals, although Ryue had expended a large amount of energy, the ordinary Burning Legion soldiers were no longer a threat to her. In just a few flashes, with the help of the Golden Lion, she had already rushed to the side of the ancient tree. With the giant tree as her support, she didn't need to deal with enemies from all directions anymore. She only needed to attack in one direction. Under Ryue's command, the Zodiac guardian gods, who were originally scattered to kill the enemies, began to attack the ancient tree. At this moment, everyone's true strength was displayed. Field Mouse was in midair, riding on Little Pung as his mount. He led the 12 Zodiac warriors and continuously charged through the Burning Legion. However, he always controlled the formation around the ancient tree. This way, if the enemy's anti-air power was too strong, he could return to the side of the ancient tree to temporarily hide. The ancient tree's defense was extremely strong. Even the hellfire could only cause minor damage to it. The thousands of branches became the best cover for the 12 Zodiac warriors as they killed their way into the depths of the Burning Legion. Chapter 327. Nine-headed snakelet. Guan Ping roared. His entire body was instantly engulfed in golden flames. Under the sudden increase in energy, his body instantly swelled to a height of 10 meters. A huge golden airflow revolved around his body. Surprisingly, there was no armor. His body was completely covered by a layer of incomparably solid golden fur. That huge body constantly let out a series of intense roars. As a lion mastiff, he was the fourth Zodiac guardian god warrior to advance to the 9-headed level. Following Guan Ping's roar, 9 huge heads popped out from his back almost at the same time. His entire body swelled up. The 9 huge snake heads emitted different colored lights. In an instant, the 9 colored lights immediately cut a bloody path, blocking the way. This caused Guan Ping to quickly move towards the direction of the ancient tree. Although he was the furthest away from the ancient tree, he was the second to arrive after Ruyue. A 9-headed Zodiac guardian god warrior was indeed powerful. A super ferocious beast that specialized in long-range attacks. The one with the strongest long-range attack power among everyone was the 9-headed snakelet, which had cultivated for more than 10,000 years. From the appearance of the 9-headed snakelet, it looked like a giant 9-headed snake. It was somewhat similar to the deep-sea nether snake before it evolved into a dark dragon, except that its body was slightly smaller. However, its 9 heads were different from the deep-sea nether snake, which would only grow 1 head to increase its strength. It was born with 9 heads, and its 9 heads could release 9 different energy attacks of different attributes. Its long-range attack power was extremely powerful. The 9 types of attack energy were gold, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, light, and darkness. It was definitely a super ferocious beast with balanced energy attributes. However, because of its extremely small numbers and weak physical attack and defense, it did not have a very high status among the ferocious beasts. However, after becoming Guan Ping's Earth token, its situation had completely changed. Although Guan Ping could not fuse with the 9-headed snakelet like Su Dong and the Black Crystal Tiger, the 9-headed snakelet could possess him after he completed the 3rd stage of origin mutation. The long golden hair and strong body of Guan Ping became the best shield for the 9-headed snakelet. If it was close, it would have Guan Ping's powerful physical attack. If it was far away, the balanced energy attack of the 9-headed snakelet was extraordinarily powerful. The lethality made the Burning Legion flinch. After the 4th 9-headed Zodiac guardian god warrior erupted, the other 8 Zodiac guardian god warriors also erupted at the same time. With Vol leading the Zodiac squad and the golden-winged Eagle Legion in the air, it was too difficult for the Burning Legion to harm. Each and every one of them displayed their extraordinary strength. Although Mo Dan's strength had not reached the 9 clouds yet, she was already at the 8 clouds level. Under the effects of the 2 attribute mutations, her body had obviously swelled up a lot. A layer of green light covered her body, and her swollen body was like a barbaric wild bull rampaging about. Her main strength was in physical attacks, and the protective energy around her body was even more tyrannical. As a result, many hell creatures only dared to hide and attack her from afar. However, if they thought that Mo Dan could only attack at close range, they would be gravely mistaken. A ray of golden light. It kept flashing around Mo Dan's body. No matter who attacked her, they would receive special treatment from the golden light. That's right, it was Mo Dan's order. Stinging golden rat. This ancient giant beast was extremely fast, and its attacks were extremely penetrative. Although its body was not big, its destructive power was extremely shocking, to the point that many large ancient giant beasts were not willing to make an enemy out of it. At this moment, it had already become Mo Dan's greatest help. With its protection, although the wounds on Mo Dan's body kept increasing, and the thundercloud force was also being consumed very quickly. However, no one could truly harm her. Modi's situation was the exact opposite of Mo Dan's. Mo Dan was the center, and the stinging golden rat was the main attacker, while Modi was the center and became the main attacker himself. Streaks of almost invisible light and shadows shot out from her long and slender legs. After going through energy compression, This seemingly thin-legged blade possessed extremely tyrannical destructive power. Moreover, the energy that Modi kicked out was completely rotating. In addition, her leg strength was extremely shocking. Usually, a single kick would kill at least a few Burning Legion soldiers. The huge diamond bear was like a moving fortress. Although its body size was far from the ancient giant trees, its defense was much stronger than the ancient giant trees. The Vajra bear was a mild-tempered neutral beast, but it did not mean that it did not have a temper. It became Modi's shield. Although the hell creatures could hardly hurt his body that was made of iron and bronze, he still felt pain. Reality proved that when a person with a gentle temperament exploded, it was often more terrifying. The adamant bear looked clumsy, but its huge paws were like two doors. There were too many people in the Burning Legion. Although it could only use its paws to attack, anyone who was hit by its paws would be smashed to smithereens, even if it was a hell creature condensed from the tallest boulder. With the diamond bear as the center, Modi used his fast speed and tyrannical leg strength to create an open space. It was not until he heard Ryue's voice that he approached the ancient giant tree with the diamond bear. It could be said that Hu Guang was like a fish in water. After receiving Ryue's order, he acted as if he didn't hear it and didn't care at all. The other Zodiac warriors more or less had some flaws and weaknesses, but the current Hu Guang, although his attack power was not so good, his body almost had no flaws. The Emperor Slime's super energy immunity, coupled with the Emperor Black Mamba's physical immunity after reaching the 8 cloud level. Not to mention these Burning Legion soldiers. Even if Satan personally attacked, it would take a lot of energy to destroy Hu Guang. Only a comprehensive super energy bombardment that exceeded the Emperor Slime's maximum defense energy could hurt Hu Guang. After Hu Guang's body went through 2 different attributes, he became extremely flexible in battle. He darted here and there, leaving a trail of black venom wherever he went. However, what made him very depressed was that these creatures from hell were very resistant to venom, and it did not achieve the effect he expected. It was far worse than when he dealt with the Jilly people. However, strong immunity did not mean complete immunity. After the concentration of the Emperor Slime, all enemies that Hu Guang had direct contact with would still fall. However, this made Hu Guang's killing speed much slower than the others, but no one could stop the slippery Hu Guang. As long as he wanted to, he could meet up with everyone at any time. Hummer and Yin Xiaoyi were now together, mainly because he was afraid that Yin Xiaoyi would be injured alone. After all, Yin Xiaoyi's own attack ability was almost negligible. Hummer was indeed a Hummer. His killing method was very simple. Whoever was close, he would punch them. Every enemy that died to him would never have a complete body. His violent three-eyed demonic ape had the same style as him, and it was also a strong attack. However, the violent three-eyed demonic ape's eyes could shoot out death rays. Wherever the tyrannical penetrating power passed, it was definitely a skewer of candied haws. Unfortunately, this kind of ray could only penetrate head-on and not sweep. Otherwise, the effect would be better. The most relaxed person on the entire battlefield was Yin Xiaoyi. Hummer, the three-eyed demonic ape, and his own Cyclops formed 3 walls surrounding him in the center. The Cyclops' mental fluctuations were more lethal than the three-eyed demonic apes. With one attack, a group of idiots from the Burning Legion would appear. The Cyclops' physical attack was equally strong. Their combination was like an iron wall. Although Yin Xiaoyi was in the middle, he was not idle. Against so many Burning Legion hell creatures, it was impossible not to be injured. However, with Yin Xiaoyi's Thundercloud force as a backup, the Hummer, the three-eyed demonic ape, and the Cyclops never sustained damage for more than 10 seconds. Layers of milky white brilliance were constantly released from the center, and in an instant, their injuries were healed. It was not far from Yin Xiaoyi. His fighting style was similar to Modi's, with his diamond gorilla as the center, constantly pushing forward. In terms of defense, the diamond gorilla was much weaker than the diamond bear. However, in terms of attack, the diamond bear was far inferior. Although the diamond gorilla was 10 meters tall, it was very agile. But he was very agile. His thick arms were very strong. Its thick arms displayed unimaginable power. As for Ian, the monkey, and the gorilla, their teamwork was even more intimate. He fully displayed his agility, concentrating his attack energy, forming a cone-shaped golden energy sword in each of his hands, specifically targeting the enemy's vital points. Therefore, although he killed a lot of people, he did not expend much of his energy. The funniest person in the battle was definitely Guan Jing. Everyone else had maintained their good figures due to long periods of training. Even Vol and Mo Dan's fat bodies had become slim. But not him. He was originally a semicircle, but now he had become a globe. That fat body of his was a complete lamp. The fire book was completely in line with his zodiac. At the start of the battle, his whole body emitted a strong yellow light. Under the effect of the dual attribute mutation, his body expanded into a huge ball of flesh with a diameter of more than 4 meters. However, this ball of flesh was filled with yellow energy. That was the energy of the Earth Black Tortoise. Guanjing also knew that his attack power was not strong, so his attack method became very special. He was like a bowling ball that kept rolling around the battlefield. Wherever he passed, as long as it wasn't a powerful soldier with a huge body, the Burning Legion's experts were all crushed by him. However, they couldn't do anything to this meatball at all, who asked him to have a strong defense like the Black Tortoise. Of course, Guanjing did not roll around randomly. He always maintained a certain area and rolled around his huge sword dragon. The sword dragon's attacks were very strong. Streaks of sword-like energy continuously created huge depressions on the ground. Of course, wherever the huge sword passed, it naturally brought about a reign of terror. Snow Girl, Shangbing, and the Plant Soul were now gathered together. Although the three of them were slightly weaker than the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, when the three of them were together, their strength was so strong that even the strongest Zodiac Guardian Warrior, Ryue, could not possibly be their match. Large patches of frost continuously erupted from the bodies of Snow Girl and her ice beast. Although it was not enough to freeze the hell creatures, it was definitely enough to greatly reduce their combat power. The Overlord Flower and Shangbing, as well as the lightning speed of the Shadow Leopard, became the best weapons to break the ice. One by one, the enemies were destroyed in front of them, and their cooperation became more and more skillful. From the start of the battle until now, most of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors had different degrees of injuries. However, at least 50,000 enemies had died in their hands, and more than 200,000 were injured. Yet, none of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors were seriously injured. This result was enough to make them proud. Only the Zodiac Guardian Warriors could have such a strong ability. Seeing that the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, Shangbing and Shangbing, gradually gathered at the ancient tree, Chi could not help but reveal a satisfied smile on his face. Frankly speaking, Hell's Burning Legion was indeed strong, but there was a very big problem. That was, they did not have enough experts. Of course, this was directly related to the fact that Chi Yu had killed dozens of 4-winged black generals and 3 dreadlords. Every Zodiac Guardian Warrior had reached the 8 cloud level, and 4 of them had even reached the 9 cloud level. With such a combination, in addition to their messengers and the support of the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors, it was impossible for the Burning Legion to directly cause them any harm. It was impossible for the Burning Legion to deal any damage to them. Even if they could destroy the Zodiac Legion, they would have to rely on numbers to grind them to death. However, it was easier said than done. With the ancient tree as the core, everyone could temporarily rest after being injured, and the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors in the air were not to be trifled with. The strength of more than 120 golden-winged eagles could even be compared to the strength of all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors below. A battle of this level would take at least 1 or 2 days. How could everyone's energy be depleted? The ancient tree moved. With its clumsy but determined steps, it walked towards Hell City. With every step it took, at least 1,000 lives of the Hell Legion were lost to the Zodiac Guardian Army. At this moment, the ancient tree was like a huge hedgehog, and the Zodiac Guardian Warriors were the sharp spikes of this hedgehog. Whoever dared to attack them would definitely be met with destruction in return. Yin Xiaoyi suddenly shouted. No one knew when, but he was already standing on the shoulder of the Cyclops. Immediately after, a layer of milky white light soared into the sky and condensed into a milky white ball of light that was more than 3 meters in diameter in midair. In an instant, it illuminated the Zodiac guardian warriors below, including those in the ancient tree. After releasing this milky white energy ball, Yin Xiaoyi's expression became visibly weary. In a flash, he had already entered the body of the ancient tree and received the strictest protection. However, although the milky white ball of light in the air could not kill the enemy, its effect was much more terrifying than killing the enemy. Wherever the milky white light passed, the injuries on the bodies of the Zodiac Guardian warriors would quickly recover at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. Apart from the ancient tree and the overlord flower, which were plants and could not be nourished by the milky white ball of light, even the combat strength of the golden-winged eagle army in the air was greatly boosted by the milky white ball of light. What would it feel like to have an army that was no longer afraid of being injured? Satan's expression could not be any uglier. The experts from the East had far exceeded his expectations. Originally, he had hoped to destroy all the humans who were blocking the advancement of Hell City by mobilizing the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers. However, the other party had only mobilized a little more than 100 people and some monsters, and they had already destroyed nearly 1/5 of the Burning Legion army. The number of injured soldiers was uncountable. At this time, the divine tiger domain that Su Dong had previously released began to play an increasingly important role. After being nourished by the divine fire in the divine tiger domain, the strength of the 150,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion had decreased significantly. Be it in terms of attack or defense, they had fallen to the bottom. Often, the branches that came from the ancient tree could easily kill them, and the number of casualties rose rapidly. In just half an hour, the Zodiac Guardian army had achieved brilliant results. They had completely charged into the hinterland of the enemy and were advancing towards Hell City. In the distance, Pope Marty, along with his 4 red-cloaked archbishops and thousands of clergymen, stared dumbfoundedly at this scene. Today, when the 500,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion appeared in an overwhelming manner, their hearts had already turned cold. Even Marty and the 4 cardinals, who had just increased their strength, did not doubt the outcome of today's battle. For a period of time, Marty even wanted to suggest to Chi Yu to retreat first and then fight the enemy with guerrilla tactics. However, Chi Yu's Zodiac Guardian army had used their strength to show them what real combat power was. Hell was not scary. What was scary was losing the will to fight. The holy aura continued to gather on the bodies of the sacred army. They were all waiting for Chi Yu's orders. At this time, even Pope Marty had placed himself in the position of Chi Yu's subordinate. The milky white ball of light released by Yin Xiaoyi in the air lasted for a full 20 minutes before it gradually dissipated. And in these 20 minutes, it was also the time when the Zodiac Guardian army killed the most enemies. At this time, they had already rushed past 2/3 of the distance, and the huge image of Hell City had completely appeared in front of them. However, as the milky white ball of light released by Yin Xiaoyi disappeared, the situation of the battle changed. The pressure seemed to have spread to every Zodiac Guardian army in an instant. Indeed, the strength of the Zodiac Guardian army was absolutely tyrannical. Even the 2 6-winged black generals that were holding back Ming Ming had been injured in many places. Under Ming Ming's continuous attacks, it seemed that they would not be able to hold on for much longer. However, the Burning Hell Legion had something that ordinary humans could not compare to. They did not know what retreat was. That's right, when the battle started, the Zodiac Guardian army had dealt heavy blows to the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers. However, they did not manage to suppress the will to fight of the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers. As time went on, the consumption of the Zodiac Guardian army had reached an extremely terrifying level. However, the Burning Legion was still like the waves of the sea, constantly crashing into their formation. They did not seem to be afraid of death at all. They did not look like they were fighting, but more like they were committing suicide. However, it was this suicidal attack that brought great pressure to the Zodiac Guardian army. blood would only make the burning legion in hell even more frenzied. They only wanted to completely destroy the enemies in front of them. They did not care whether they would be hurt or not. As the enemy's counterattack became more and more violent, and as more and more of the Zodiac Guardian army were seriously injured, the balance of the battle began to tilt. One had to admit that the ancient tree was very useful. Although the giant tree was already riddled with scars, it was precisely because of the existence of the giant tree that the Zodiac Guardian army's injuries were minimized. At least half of its branches had been broken, and only a small amount of its length was left. However, it continued to hold on. The heavily injured Zodiac Guardian army and the great golden-winged eagles in the sky would all breathe on the thick branches of the ancient tree. It was the ancient tree that used its body to protect them. That was why the Zodiac Guardian army had not suffered a single casualty until now. However, the rate at which the Zodiac Guardian army was decreasing. In particular, the great golden-winged eagles in the sky were the target of all. At least a third of them had returned to the ancient tree, and the remaining great golden-winged eagles' speed and attack power had been greatly reduced. The battle had completely fallen into a disadvantageous situation. Among the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers, at least 3 million of them still had combat power. Chiyu couldn't help but sigh as he watched from the sky. That's right. The overall strength of the Zodiac Guardian army had indeed greatly increased, but there were still too many enemies. As the saying goes, when there are too many ants, they can even bite an elephant to death. If this continued, it would be very difficult for them to break out of the encirclement. Furthermore, it was very likely that they would be fatally injured. That was something that Chi-Yu couldn't afford to bear. At this moment, he couldn't help but fantasize. If the 9-star alignment had appeared a little later, all the Zodiac Guardian God warriors would have been able to reach the 9-cloud level in the 5 elements domain. Then, not to mention the 500,000 Burning Legion soldiers in front of him. Even if 3 million Burning Legion soldiers appeared on the battlefield at the same time, he would definitely be able to fight them. That would be the real battle. The energy in his body quietly gathered. Even if he had to give up on the battlefield in the west, Chi-Yu would definitely not let any of his comrades suffer any injuries. To him, the lives of his comrades were the most important. If the battle reached a point where he couldn't bear it anymore, then what was the wager with Satan? He would rush out at the first moment and save his comrades. Satan's ugly expression finally relaxed a little. He said proudly, "I have to admit, Chi-Yu, you Easterners are indeed very strong. So strong that it's beyond my imagination. Unfortunately, everything I said before won't change. No matter how strong you are individually, you can't make up for such a huge difference in numbers. I think you should be very clear on this point. Even though my Burning Legion isn't as elite as it was when it was 100,000 strong after the massive expansion, however, the experts in hell are definitely not greedy for life and afraid of death. Now, do you still think that they can rush out of my 500,000 soldiers?" Chi-Yu said sincerely, "The Burning Legion's combat strength is the strongest army I've ever seen. Even if they know that they are going to die, none of them will retreat. This kind of army is a true iron-blooded army. If it's the same number of soldiers, even if they have the same combat strength, I think that the ones who lose will definitely be us humans. However, Your Majesty Satan, our wager is not over yet. I will not admit defeat before the battle is really over." Satan winked at Lucifer. Lucifer naturally understood what Satan meant. Today's losses were already too great. Obviously, Chi-Yu had become their biggest obstacle. If they still couldn't catch Chi-Yu and the other Guardians of the East in one fell swoop after such a great loss, then today's losses could be said to be worthless. What Satan needed to do was to prepare the other Burning Legion in Hell City. No matter what the final result of the wager was, he must destroy the Zodiac Legion. At that time, only Chi-Yu would be left. Although he was also a great threat, he was only one person after all. He couldn't stop the invasion of hell at all. Of course, this was only Satan's wishful thinking. Chi-Yu slightly narrowed his eyes. Under the guidance of his soul, his mental strength quietly entered the battlefield. Even experts like Satan and Lucifer couldn't detect it. His voice sounded in the minds of every Zodiac warrior almost at the same time. Break out of the encirclement and leave the rest to me. This simple sentence showed Chi-Yu's trust in the Zodiac warriors. At the same time, it was also his own confidence. The situation on the battlefield was always changing. After receiving Chi-Yu's instructions, the Zodiac Legion's formation, which was already showing signs of decline, suddenly changed. Ming Ming, who was in midair, let out a loud and clear cry. Her huge phoenix wings instantly stretched out. Two huge fiery red energy rays shot out and once again sent the two six-winged black generals flying. This time, if they wanted to attack again, it would not be so easy. At the same time, Ming Ming turned around and no longer entangled with the enemy. In a flash, she had already arrived above the ancient giant tree. With a flash of red light, the ancient giant tree that was riddled with scars almost disappeared in an instant. The golden-winged eagles that were previously injured also flew up together with their masters. The triangular formation was once again spread out, but this time it was a double triangle. The golden-winged eagle legion, with Vol and Little Peng as the vanguard, formed a triangle in the sky. The remaining 11 Zodiac Guardian warriors and their messengers formed another triangle on the ground. Without the ancient giant tree's large-scale defense, the pressure in the surroundings suddenly increased. However, the Zodiac warriors who had previously been in a decline suddenly broke out. Ming Ming, who had transformed into a vermilion bird, stretched her body in the air. The red light turned back into 9 colors, and a huge light barrier descended from the sky. The range of the light barrier extended infinitely, mainly in front of them. Vermilion bird domain. A cold voice came out of Ming Ming's mouth. The 9-colored light was very strange. Within its range, all the hell creatures temporarily stopped moving and fell into a complete daze. This was because in their eyes, they could no longer see anything other than the 9-colored light. Immediately after, a change occurred. The intense and dazzling 9-colored light suddenly split apart. Tiny rays of light transformed into 9-colored feathers that gently fluttered in the air. Bloody wounds appeared on almost every hell creature in an instant. Their bodies were instantly sliced apart. Under Ming Ming's control, the feathers that were completely formed by energy instantly became gorgeous, violent, and gorgeous. Without the ancient giant tree, although their defense was greatly reduced, at the same time, it also increased the speed of the Zodiac warriors to a terrifying level. There was almost no pause. Every Zodiac warrior rushed out after Ming Ming's domain. Although the vermilion bird domain could not cover as large an area as the white tiger domain, nor could it tear space apart like Ryue's divine dragon domain, which could instantly destroy a large number of enemies, the duration of the vermilion bird's domain was undoubtedly the longest. With the vermilion bird flying in the air as a guide, it actually moved forward slowly. Wherever it went, it was invincible. Ming Ming was in charge of the front, while Guan Ping, who had not fully released his power, stayed behind. Together with his messenger, Jiao Ying, they released their powerful abilities. Guan Ping's domain was very strange. After reaching the 9 clouds level, his domain was actually a sheet of golden light. That sheet of golden light was only a few dozen square meters in size. It was far from being comparable to the divine dragon, white tiger, and vermilion bird domains. However, at this moment, its effect was not inferior to those 3 domains. This was because the attribute of Guan Ping's domain was amplification. Pure amplification was also the greatest amplification. Chapter 328. Ming Ming and Guan Ping, the 2 Zodiac warriors who had reached the 9 cloud level, were in the front and at the back. They exerted their strength to the limit, while the other Zodiac warriors and the messengers protected the flanks. The group of people rushed forward as fast as they could. The Burning Legion, who had just relieved some of the pressure with great difficulty, could not stop them at all. They could only watch as a large amount of blood spurted out. The enemies in front of them were getting farther and farther away from Hell City. Lucifer's body disappeared under the cover of Satan's huge body. Chi-Yu's gaze was on the battlefield, as if he did not notice. Satan's expression became more and more unsightly. The two powerful rays of light in front and behind the Zodiac Legion were getting closer and closer to the final sprint. Powerful Easterners. This was the only thought in Satan's mind. At the same time, it was also the reason why he was filled with terror and a desire to destroy. Boom! The Vermilion Bird's domain lasted for a full 10 minutes before it finally dissipated. At least 70% of the Burning Legion soldiers who had been covered by the White Tiger's domain were destroyed by the Vermilion Bird's domain. After all, their defense had been weakened to its lowest state by the White Tiger's domain. How could they possibly resist the Vermilion Bird's domain? The faint light flickered. Chi-Yu's gaze gradually became focused. He was quietly waiting for the moment when the final attack was completed. His companions had done everything they needed to do. Then, he would be the one to rely on next. Finally, with a loud bang, the 12 Zodiac warriors unleashed their power at the same time and unleashed their most powerful attack. All the Burning Legion soldiers within a radius of several hundred square meters were instantly blown to pieces. They took this opportunity to rush out of the encirclement. At this moment, all the warriors of the Zodiac army were injured. Not a single one of them was uninjured. Not only did they have their own blood on them, but most of it came from their enemies. The piercing attack had caused them to destroy nearly 2/5 of the enemy's strength. That was the number of 200,000 Burning Legion soldiers. No one had expected them to accomplish such a great feat. Even Chi-Yu did not expect the Zodiac army to achieve such a brilliant result while breaking through the enemy's formation. In fact, with the strength of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors, if they just wanted to rush over, they would not be able to do so. In that case, he would have to pay much less than he did now. After all, if Ryue and Su Dong hadn't released a large area of effect attack, the two of them would have been there. Naturally, he would be able to lead everyone out of the encirclement faster. Your Majesty, you've already lost. Chi-Yu glared at Satan. A strange light appeared in Satan's eyes. Is that so? Did I really lose? Chi-Yu smiled calmly. Of course, it's time for you to fulfill our bet. While the two of them were talking in the air, the battle below did not end with the Zodiac army's appearance. All the soldiers of the Burning Legion went crazy. They surrounded the Zodiac Legion and charged at them. In the face of these terrifying enemies, they did not show the slightest bit of cowardice. But at this moment, the gates of Hell City opened, and countless Burning Legion soldiers charged out. They pincer attacked from the front and back like an ocean tide. They wanted to destroy these enemies who had just obtained glorious results. Chi-Yu seemed to have predicted that Satan would do this. His body had already turned into a shadow, and he pounced on the battlefield. Stay here, Satan snorted coldly. The 12 wings on his back instantly stretched out. He had been preparing for a long time. This was the moment he had been waiting for. A huge dark red light covered the sky and the earth as it surged toward Chi-Yu. No matter how fast Chi-Yu was, he could not be faster than the time it took for him to release the Demon King domain. Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique. A faint voice came out of Chi-Yu's mouth. Suddenly, the same dark red light surged from his body. In the next moment, Satan suddenly felt his vision go black. It was as if he had entered another world. Chi-Yu's preparation time was even longer than Satan's. When he shouted the words Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique, he had already released his domain. It happened to be a little faster than Satan's release of the Demon King domain. Therefore, when the Demon King domain was released, the Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique had already come into effect. Therefore, the Demon King domain was released within the Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique. Sumeru into a mustard seed. Shrink. Chi-Yu naturally knew that the Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique could not trap Satan. However, as long as it could stop him for a while, it would be completely enough. Under the miraculous effect of the Infinite Transformation Xuanji Realm Technique, Satan's Demon King domain instantly shrank in front of him. However, Chi-Yu had already disappeared from the dark red light. Not good, Satan secretly exclaimed. The demonic power in his body was raised to the limit at an incomparably powerful speed. He swung the Demon King's sword and slashed forward. However, after he released his demonic power, he was shocked to find that the dark red light in front of him did not have the slightest effect on him. Wherever the sword light went, the seemingly powerful domain had already been dissolved. Ling'er had also appeared by his side. Sometimes, victory or defeat could be decided with a single thought, just like the current situation. When the scenery in front of Satan's eyes opened up again, Chiyu had already arrived above the Zodiac army. At this moment, the enemies that were surrounding them had already attacked. However, there was a faint smile on Chiyu's face. Everyone has worked hard. Now, you can go back and rest. The five-colored light descended from the sky like a huge and gorgeous glass dome, enveloping everyone, including the golden-winged Eagle Legion. All the members of the army were completely included. In the next moment, while the hellish creatures were still frantically attacking, they suddenly lost sight of their enemy. Not even a trace was left behind. Chiyu's body shot up into the sky and returned in front of Satan. He said calmly, "Your Majesty, are you going to break the agreement?" Chiyu naturally knew that Lucifer had left. Given his strong mind power and his ability to pay attention to the situation, how could he not know that a powerful opponent had suddenly disappeared? Moreover, he had already guessed that Satan would break the agreement after the Zodiac army broke through the barrier. After all, Satan had come from hell, so it was normal for him to go back on his word. Therefore, he had already made preparations. The great transformation of the Jade Pearl realm was just to confuse Satan. After Chiyu rushed out, he had already removed the domain. This was also why Satan had been able to break through the domain so easily. By the time Satan saw everything in front of him, the matter had already been resolved. Although many of the soldiers of the Zodiac army had been injured, none of them had died. However, not a single one of them had died, and their enemies had already lost a whopping 200,000 people. Satan's aura fluctuated unstably. His heart, which had finally matured after the incident with Chiyu, was now on the verge of exploding again. As he looked at Chiyu, the light in his eyes became more and more violent, and a surging murderous intent surged out continuously. If he allowed his enemy to destroy a large number of his subordinates and leave without any losses, then it would not just be a matter of damage to his forces. Chiyu, do you think you could defeat the powerhouses of hell like this? Satan looked coldly at Chiyu. He was already prepared to attack at any time. On the other side, Lucifer, who had lost his target, had already flown over. Together with Satan, they seemed to be sandwiching Chiyu in the middle. In the face of such a crisis, Chiyu did not panic. He smiled calmly and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to attack, who can stop you? If you want to attack, who can stop you? However, I just want to ask you a question. Just now, does our bet still count? I think, as the commander of hell, you won't go back on your word." You. Satan looked at Chiyu. He realized that this human from the east in front of him was the real devil. Everything seemed to be within his calculations. From the beginning of the battle until now, he had been at an absolute disadvantage. Of course, the bet still counts. However, when I said that we won't fight for 5 days, I didn't say which 5 days. Now, let me tell you, starting from tomorrow, for 5 days, the Burning Legion will not fight. However, today, you must stay, as well as those subordinates of yours. The human army dozens of miles away must also be completely destroyed today. My Burning Legion still has 8 million soldiers. Do you think that I will let you go? Chiyu said coldly. I already guessed that you would do this. Since that's the case, then we can only fight. However, I hope that you won't regret it. Your decision will only bring about greater losses to your subordinates. Satan looked at Chiyu. His body suddenly moved. His huge body did not affect his speed. The 12 wings on his back instantly expanded, and the Demon King's domain was directly activated. Lucifer also moved. He retracted his 8 wings and quietly rushed in the direction of Chiyu. Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "Since you want to fight, then come. Also, Ling'er, you can come at me together. Let's see what the 3 of you can do to me." The light on Chiyu's body lit up, and a pure gold armor appeared on his body. 5-colored light gushed out at the same time, and 5 giant dragons suddenly appeared, floating around Chi-Yu's body to protect him. Lucifer's sneak attack was immediately blocked by the golden dragon of the 5 elements divine dragon. Although it could not defeat Lucifer, it could still block him for a short period of time. Satan, I will let you know the consequences of not keeping to the bet. Just watch. I will let the seal that originally belonged to the canyon of myriad demons return to the human world. Even if I have to risk my life, I will make your army disappear. As he spoke, an illusory figure suddenly floated out of Chi-Yu's body. The figure's appearance was exactly the same as Chi-Yu's, only the eyes were different. The figure that suddenly flew out had a pair of eyes that were even clearer than Chi-Yu's. There was a gentle glint in his eyes, as if everything had nothing to do with him. The moment this figure appeared, it immediately flew in the direction of Hell City. The Burning Legion's army was currently rushing in the direction of the Sacred Legion. However, because of the powerful attack from the Zodiac Legion, they were now quite a distance away from the Sacred Legion. When he saw the figure that separated from Chi-Yu's body, Satan immediately felt that something was wrong. He stretched out his arms, shaking off the 2 divine dragons in front of him, and went straight for Chi-Yu. Do you want to get past me? Bring it on. The 5 elements divine dragons suddenly split up. They changed their target and rushed directly in the direction of Lung Air. At the same time, the 4 types of thundercloud force also spread out from Chi-Yu's body. The infinite change of the Big Dipper realm technique appeared once again, and a huge amount of energy directly enveloped Satan and Lucifer. The infinite change of the Big Dipper realm technique was naturally unable to stop experts like Satan and Lucifer. However, they needed time to activate their energy to break this realm. However, Chi would not give them this time. In the infinite change of the Big Dipper realm technique, Chi-Yu's speed, attack power, and various attributes were all raised to their best state. Having already completely understood the power of the realm, he was like a fish in water in the realm. Just his teleportation alone, which was traceless, made it impossible for Satan and Lucifer to trap him. Chi-Yu also did not launch an all-out attack, and simply moved between the 2 of them. However, Satan and Lucifer could not ignore him. Otherwise, it would definitely be a devastating blow, especially for Lucifer. He knew very well that he could not even take a single blow from Chi-Yu. Only by cooperating with Satan could he have a chance of defeating Chi-Yu. This time, when using the infinite change of the Big Dipper realm technique, Chi-Yu did not block the view of the outside world. The dark red light was transparent, and it was just enough for Satan to see the battle outside. Lung Air was entangled by the 5 elements divine dragons. She was indeed very powerful. With the help of the Devil's Kiss, she had actually killed a divine dragon in such a short period of time. However, the most powerful attribute of the 5 elements divine dragons was immortality. As long as the Kong Tong seal was still there, and as long as there was enough time, the 5 elements divine dragons could resurrect indefinitely. Therefore, it was definitely not an easy task for Lung Air to defeat them. The battle continued, but Satan's gaze soon froze. This was because through the infinite change of the Big Dipper realm technique, he saw with his own eyes that the other Chi-Yu, who had separated from Chi-Yu's body, was now floating not far from Hell City. His body had already taken on a bluish-purple color. Although the sky was dark, under the illumination of the numerous energy lights below, everyone could still clearly see a large number of dark clouds floating in the sky. The huge dark clouds flickered with bolts of lightning in the sky, and the huge pressure had already attracted the attention of the Burning Legion below. The flying warriors of the Burning Legion were like moths flying into a flame as they charged toward the other Chi-Yu in the sky. However, when they were about 100 meters away from the other Chi-Yu, they immediately encountered an invisible barrier. As the bluish-purple light became more and more intense, the energy fluctuations on the other Chi-Yu's body reached a terrifying level. Chi-Yu, what are you doing? Satan and Lucifer stood together and used all their strength to force Chi-Yu back. Satan couldn't help but ask in shock when he recalled what Chi-Yu had said before. Chi-Yu silently appeared 30 meters in front of them and said indifferently, I just said that you have to pay the price for not complying with the bet. Just wait and see what happened in the Canyon of Demons. It will appear again. Satan, do you still remember the scene when we fought in hell? At that time, my strength wasn't even comparable to yours. However, in the end, you couldn't stop me from escaping because my doppelganger had attacked you. To tell you the truth, I have a domain that belongs to me. It's called the doppelganger domain. When I use this domain, I can separate myself from myself. He has the same intelligence as me, and the same strength. Although the doppelganger can't exist for a long time, he still has the ability to launch an attack. Now, I've transferred all my lightning attribute energy to him. Just wait and see. He'll let you know what the world's catastrophe is. That's right. It'll be very difficult for me to defeat you and Lucifer, but don't think that you can easily escape from the battlefield. You might be able to resist the power of the lightning ball for a while, but can your subordinates do it? Listening to Chi Yu's words, Satan and Lucifer couldn't help but have their complexions change. They naturally knew how terrifying the lightning ball above the Canyon of Demons was. Now that they heard it from Chi Yu, they knew that the catastrophe was coming. Chi Yu's doppelganger, or rather, Wen Ting, quickly proved Chi Yu's words with her actions. The dark clouds in the sky had already completely shrouded the Hell City below. Shortly after, a blue light suddenly appeared. In just a flash, it came to the ground. Satan was all too familiar with this form. That's right, it was a lightning ball. The ones who had the greatest reaction were the 3,000 experts from Hell who had come out of the myriad Fiend's Gorge. Even Satan had to admit that these 3,000 fellows were the strongest part of the Burning Legion. Previously, when facing the attack of the Zodiac Legion, these experts had cunningly hidden at the back and didn't suffer too many losses. They also didn't fear the Zodiac Legion. But now it was different. Suddenly seeing the lightning ball that had imprisoned them for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, suddenly appear in the mortal world, their only feeling was that their souls had flown out of their bodies. Without any hesitation, they let out shrill screams and fled in all directions. They quickly fled into the distance, not even daring to return to Hell City. The lightning ball showed its might. A huge blue ball of light suddenly exploded in midair, right next to Wen Ting. The flying hell creatures that were attacking Wen Ting didn't even have a chance to resist the lightning ball that was filled with the energy of heaven and earth. They were completely turned into ashes. The thunderclouds in the sky became more and more intense. No one could see the changes clearly, but the blue lightning became more and more obvious. Chi Yu stretched out 2 fingers and smiled at Satan. Next time it'll be 2. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 huge lightning balls descended from the sky and blasted into the crowd below in the blink of an eye. In midair, the bluish-purple light on Wen Ting's body became even more eye-catching, and the energy on her body was also filled with a violent aura. 2 huge craters appeared on the ground. Wherever the energy passed, the land was completely scorched. Even the Burning Legion's hell creatures were turned into a part of the scorched land. The powerful energy aura filled every soldier of the Burning Legion with fear. Before this, the Zodiac Legion had only been made up of manpower. However, the lightning that descended from the sky now exceeded the scope of their understanding. The 2 huge lightning balls took the lives of at least thousands of soldiers of the Burning Legion. As the lightning balls bombarded the most densely packed areas, more soldiers of the Burning Legion fell into a state of paralysis. Chi Yu's 2 fingers had already become 4. Each time, it will double. For lightning balls descended from the sky and once again verified his words. Satan's psychological defenses finally collapsed at this moment. He suddenly felt that the human in front of him was so invincible that even his fighting spirit seemed to have been shattered by the bombardment of the lightning balls descending from the sky. All right, I'll abide by the bet. 5 days. I'll give you 5 days to continue preparing. Lucifer announced the retreat. Lucifer's voice spread far and wide. Even without Chi Yu's obstruction, Lucifer definitely wouldn't dare to rush towards Wen Ting's incarnation of Chi Yu. He wasn't confident that he could withstand the bombardment of the lightning balls. The 4 lightning balls had already caused even more damage to the Burning Legion below. Lucifer's order to retreat finally freed these soldiers. They retreated frantically towards Hell City at a speed that was almost twice as fast as when they had come. Even their original formation had become scattered. After all, these soldiers that Satan had gathered could not compare to the original 100,000 elite Burning Legion. They might not be afraid of death, but they were not afraid of death. Perhaps they weren't afraid of death, but they definitely didn't want to be bombarded to death by the lightning for no reason. Chiyu didn't look at Satan again. His figure flashed and merged with Wen Ting once again. Although the dark clouds in the sky still existed, the light of the lightning had clearly weakened a lot. Satan flew past Chiyu with Lucifer and Lung Air. He looked at him with eyes full of hatred. "All right, Chiyu, once again. You've once again made me fail in front of you. But this will definitely be the last time." Chiyu said proudly, "If you have the confidence to destroy me, I'll be waiting for you in 5 days." The Burning Legion retreated back to Hell City like a tide. The dark red light once again enveloped this city that belonged to Hell. The lightning balls in the sky also gradually disappeared. Chiyu's face suddenly became much paler. His figure flashed, and he returned to the camp of the Holy Church's Sacred Legion. "Your Holiness, continue to monitor the Burning Legion's movements here. They probably won't move for the next 5 days, but it's better to be careful. I'll first find a place to rest. You don't need to look for me. As long as Satan appears again, I'll naturally rush back." After saying this, Chiyu's figure had already disappeared in front of Pope Marty. "Ting Ting, that was really dangerous just now. It seems that having more people is still a great advantage." Sitting on a quiet hill, Chiyu sighed and muttered to himself. At this moment, his face had already gradually regained its rosy color. Wen Ting's voice sounded in his heart. "Yes, it seems that Satan was really scared by you." Chiyu laughed and said, "No, he wasn't scared by me. He was scared by the lightning balls. After all, that was a powerful seal that had troubled Hell for who knows how many years." Wen Ting asked curiously, "Chiyu, how did you know that Satan would announce a retreat when the 4 lightning balls fell? If he didn't retreat at that time, what should we do?" Chiyu smiled bitterly and said, "I didn't even know that he would announce a retreat at that time. If he didn't choose to retreat, then we could only fight with our lives on the line. If we fight with our lives on the line, even if I'm seriously injured, I'm confident that I can destroy Lucifer. At that time, we'll just retreat first, and those people from the church won't be able to care about them for the time being. Fortunately, this isn't our country, isn't it? You, what should I say about you?" Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "That's right. I'm indeed very selfish. Ting Ting, you have to understand that I can't risk my life and the lives of my companions to resist Satan. That in itself is also meaningless, and the outcome will not change. But if I preserve our strength and use our strength to harass Satan or find an opportunity to kill Satan, the crisis of Hell's descent will be easily resolved, isn't it?" Wen Ting chuckled and said, "All right, I can't win against you in an argument. But this time, you've used up too much energy. Hurry up and recover first. Moreover, Ming Ming and the rest's injuries will also depend on your strength." It turned out that when the final battle started, Chiyu didn't have any bargaining chips in his hands. However, he relied on his psychological advantage and deceived Satan with the doppelganger domain. The doppelganger domain could indeed have the same energy as him. After his thundercloud force was raised near the peak realm, the doppelganger could also stay outside for a longer period of time. However, if he wanted to release a super energy like the ball lightning, even Chiyu's main body would have to consume a large amount of thundercloud force. Using the doppelganger domain to activate it, the current limit was only 7 balls. Chiyu was already prepared. If Satan wasn't deceived by him, then the next ones to attack would be the Sacred Army. He would also try his best to destroy Lucifer first. In any case, it was impossible for Satan to capture or destroy him. Satan sat quietly on his throne in Hell City and didn't say a word. His eyes became extremely calm, so calm that Lung Air and Lucifer felt a strong sense of fear. They all knew that today's battle had dealt a huge blow to Satan. Satan slowly raised his head and said to Lucifer, "Contact Hades for me. I have something to say to him." Yes, your majesty. Chapter 329. Satan slowly raised his head and said to Lucifer, "Contact Hades, the underworld king. I have something to say to him." "Yes, your majesty." As Lucifer chanted, a faint gray light condensed in the air, forming a mirror-like energy fluctuation. After a while, the energy light gradually became clear, and a handsome face quietly appeared in the mirror. "Oh, it's your majesty, Satan. May I know why you are looking for me? Could it be that you have encountered trouble on your side?" Satan said in a deep voice, "Are you gloating, Hades? I'm afraid that it's not easy on your side either. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been limited to a small area in America." Although Satan was in Germany, it didn't mean that he didn't know about Hades' situation. Hades' expression changed slightly, and he said, "Athena is the complete Athena in this world. It's not just the energy of the inheritance. Lord Satan, I also want to question you." Satan said faintly, "So, you're really in trouble?" Hades nodded and said, "Although the real Athena is slightly inferior to me in terms of strength, she is a very annoying force when she joins forces with her constellation guardians. 2 of my underworld generals have already died in their hands. Although they are no match for me, how can I conquer America if they keep harassing me? I need time." Satan hesitated for a moment, but his gaze quickly became firm. "Hades, bring your people and come my side." Hades was slightly taken aback at first. Then, a strange look appeared in his eyes. "Come to where?" "Satan, I don't understand what you mean." Satan stood up and paced back and forth in the room. He only stopped after he had paced back and forth 3 times. "To tell you the truth, the trouble I am in is much bigger than yours. If I want to occupy Earth, I must first solve the problem I am facing. Otherwise, it will be difficult for me to advance. Once the trouble I am facing comes to you, you will only end up destroyed." Hades looked at Satan in surprise. "Why? You and your burning legion can't even deal with those so-called clowns from the Vatican? Those guys are only the representatives of heaven in the natural world. I don't believe that they can obstruct you." A bloodthirsty light flashed in Satan's eyes, and he slowly shook his head. "No, of course it's not those clowns from the Vatican. It's a powerhouse from the East on Earth. Hades, you should know that before the various planes really appeared, the powerhouses that appeared in the East on Earth were simply too strong for us to deal with, although they were all destroyed in the end. However, the power they had left behind was still very powerful. What I'm facing now is an enemy who's more powerful than me and his subordinates. With him working together with the church, I can't do anything here." Hearing Satan's voice getting louder and louder, Hades' expression changed slightly. Although he was worried that Satan was deceiving him and wanted to lure him over to destroy him, however, he was very clear that Satan was a very arrogant person, just like himself. At their level, there was no need to use deception to do anything. There was no need to use deception to do anything. That was something that their dignity did not allow them to do. A faint light flashed. Satan's eyes revealed a trace of tyrannical radiance. He clearly saw the hesitation in Hades' eyes. A dark red radiance pierced directly from his eyes into the gray mirror in front of him. He used his spiritual energy to transmit everything he had recorded on the battlefield to Hades. The silence lasted for more than half an hour. From the gray mirror, it could be seen that the light in Hades' eyes had become more and more surprised. His expression also became more and more serious. Obviously, he did not expect Satan to face such a powerful enemy. At the same time, he also understood why Satan called him over. After a long time, when everything on the battlefield had been deeply imprinted in Hades' mind, his voice had become much sharper. Humans can actually have such powerful strength. "Satan, it seems that we were all wrong. Perhaps we should not have come to this world at all." Satan said in a deep voice, "It's too late to say anything now. Even if you want to withdraw, I'm afraid it's too late. Are you willing to give up on this fat piece of earth? Actually, the situation is not as bad as you think. The reason why I can't do anything to those human experts from the East is mainly because more than half of my subordinates have already been injured. Back then, the leader of the Eastern human, Chi Yu, had destroyed a large number of 4-winged black generals in hell. As long as you can come over and combine our strength, I think it won't be a problem to destroy him. As long as these Eastern experts are destroyed by us, there will be no one in this world who can stop us from moving forward. Hades hesitated. But are you really confident that you can do it? I saw it too. That human only released a clone at the end, yet he managed to destroy so many of your subordinates. Furthermore, all of his subordinates are so powerful. Even my netherworld general would not be able to defeat them one-on-one. Satan, are you trying to make use of me? Satan snorted coldly. I'm not that senseless. If I could do it, do you think that I would have invited you over? Satan, the demon king of hell, swear by the purple son of hell that if Hades and I can destroy the experts in the east of Earth, then after we occupy Earth in the future, I am willing to give half of the territory to Hades to control and not to invade. If I violate this oath, the purple sun will explode and hell will be destroyed. After listening to Satan's vow, Hades was instantly moved. To hell creatures, Hades' expression changed. This was definitely the most vicious oath. At this moment, he no longer had any doubts about Satan's words. He nodded and said, "All right then, I will immediately meet up with you. Although the human is powerful, there are still very few of them. This is good too. Let's gather all the experts on Earth together and destroy them. This will save us trouble in the future." Satan's eyes flashed coldly. "Before you come, don't alarm those Greek guardians. It's best if we could destroy all the humans in the East before the Greek guardians arrive. This way, we can achieve our goal of destroying them one by one. Who else can stop us from moving forward?" Hades smiled slightly. His very feminine face looked very charming. "As long as your majesty Satan does not forget your promise." In terms of strength, he knew that there was still a gap between the underworld and hell. There were many creatures in hell. If they really relied on their own strength to occupy Earth, at least 2/3 of Earth's area would belong to hell. At this time, Satan was willing to use half of Earth's territory to cooperate with him. This was enough to satisfy Hades. Satan nodded to Lucifer. The spiritual power that Lucifer released changed, and the specific location of Hell City was transmitted to Hades. The cooperation between the two sides was reached. Naturally, Chiyu did not know that Satan had invited Hades over because of the strength of him and the Zodiac army. At this time, he was quietly cultivating in a quiet place. The energy in his body was gradually recovering by relying on the energy of the origin of nature. With the energy of the source of nature, he had recovered nearly 2/3 of his previous consumption. "Chiyu." A low voice woke Chiyu from his state of cultivation. The voice came from within his body. It was Yinling. "Big brother Yinling, what's wrong?" Chiyu asked in surprise. The Kongtong seal had recognized him as its master for a long time, but Yinling rarely took the initiative to find him. Something must have happened. Could it be that one of his companions in the Zodiac army was exhausted? Yinling said in a low voice, "Enter the 5 elements field. I will ask the 5 elements divine dragon to protect your body. Your friend needs you." Chiyu did not ask any more questions. He hurriedly completely integrated his spiritual power with his soul and directly entered the 5 elements field. The Zodiac warriors were all standing quietly at this time. Their injuries had obviously recovered a little. In the center of the more than 100 Zodiac warriors, a huge ancient tree was standing there. Compared to the previous battle, the ancient tree seemed to have deteriorated a lot. At least 80% of its huge body's branches had been broken, and its originally surging life aura had now become a dying breath. A layer of black light appeared all over its body. Corrosion and all kinds of negative dark energy were constantly moving rhythmically on its huge body. What's going on? Chiyu entered the 5 elements field and saw this situation. He hurriedly flew forward. Everyone saw that Chiyu had come. They immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Ming Ming's eyes glistened with tears. She rushed to Chiyu in a big stride. "Chiyu, you must save it. In order to protect all of us, it has released almost all of its vitality. In the battle, it also suffered the most damage. He has endured countless attacks from the Burning Legion's dark energy, and now he can't hold on any longer. Even the plant's soul sister can't save his life. I can clearly feel that his life mark is gradually disappearing, and I can't even contact him anymore. Chiyu's gaze turned towards the plant's soul. The plant's soul solemnly nodded its head and said, "My plant energy has no effect on him. He has suffered too many darkness attacks, and his body is already too concentrated with too much darkness energy. If this continues, he will die in at most an hour. Brother Chiyu, I'm afraid only you can save its life." Just as Mingming had said, the ancient tree had played a huge role in the Zodiac army's success today. His large-scale defense had protected everyone and reduced the number of attacks they suffered to a minimum. It was also because of this that he had suffered the most damage. Chi did not speak. He floated in front of the ancient tree, stretched out a hand, and pressed on its thick trunk. His mental strength mixed with the aura of the soul floated out and instantly enveloped the entire ancient tree. Soon, his mental strength transmitted the ancient tree's information back to him. Indeed, just as the plant soul had said, the ancient tree had suffered terrible damage. Its life mark was constantly being eroded by the dark energy, and it was about to wither away as the end of its life. If it was someone else, of course, they would not be able to deal with this. However, Chi was different. One of his strongest abilities was the origin of nature. With the origin of nature, how could he let the ancient tree be sacrificed for no reason? The green light quietly entered the ancient tree. At the same time, a layer of blue light was released from Chiyu's body and completely enveloped the ancient tree. Destroy. With a low roar, the blue light surrounding the ancient giant tree instantly exploded. Immediately, waves of thunderous roars resounded. Countless lightning bolts surrounded the ancient giant tree's body, emitting bursts of rumbling sounds. The enormous lightning energy instantly bombarded the ancient giant tree's body into a charred state. "Chiyu, what are you doing?" Ming cried out and had already pounced on the ancient tree. Suddenly, her arm tightened and her body was pulled back into a warm embrace. Ryue's voice rang in Ming's ear. "Leave it to him. Don't you believe in his ability?" Ming raised her head and looked at Ryue with teary eyes. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she held back in the end. The charred ancient tree had already stopped trembling. It stood there, as if it had lost all signs of life. His body had been charred black by the lightning bolts, and the branches were rapidly falling off, turning into charcoal as they fell to the ground and turned into ashes. When the Zodiac warriors who had been protected by him saw this scene, they couldn't help but feel a sharp pain in their hearts. How could they not be sad when their comrade in battle had become like this? Moreover, the ancient tree was like their mother. It had always been protecting them. The dark green light continued to flow from Chiyu's palms into the charred tree trunk. As the branches gradually fell off, a layer of faint green light appeared on the tree trunk. The huge ancient tree only had a bare trunk left standing. Moreover, 1/3 of the trunk had already been destroyed in the roar of lightning. A strange scene appeared when everyone was worried. The ancient tree that had stopped showing signs of life suddenly trembled slightly, as if it was trying to break free from something. Not long after, the top of the huge trunk began to grow. Even the trunk began to expand. Although the speed of expansion was very slow, it was very obvious because the charcoal on the trunk fell off as it expanded. The brown trunk reappeared. Moreover, it had a much more vigorous life force than before. The huge ancient tree grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. First, the trunk grew to its original height, and even exceeded it a little. Then, thick branches began to separate from its body. The separation speed was very fast. Every time there was an energy fluctuation, at least 10 branches would separate. Moreover, these branches were still separating for the second time. In this way, the ancient tree's body was rejuvenated. After an unknown period of time, when everyone was completely dumbfounded by the spectacle in front of them, the ancient tree had completely returned to its original form. In fact, it was even larger than before, and its life aura had also become denser. great origin of nature, thank you for pulling me back from the brink of death." The old voice was filled with respect and sincere gratitude. Retracting his hands, Chi smiled and said, "Senior, we should be the ones thanking you. If it wasn't for you, perhaps my companions would have suffered great harm today. I'm already very sorry that you had to bear the corrosion of the dark energy. But don't worry, as long as your life imprint still exists, I have the confidence to restore you to your original appearance. Moreover, if I don't restore you, I'm afraid that Ming Ming will fight with me." As he spoke, Chi smiling gaze subconsciously fell on Ming Ming. Ming Ming blushed and said in a low voice, "You're so annoying. You only know how to scare people. Can't you just help the ancient tree to recover?" Chi pretended to be aggrieved. He said, "Why don't I want to help it recover? However, you must understand that Senior Ancient Tree's body has already been completely contaminated by the darkness energy. If I don't first remove the darkness energy from his body, even if I manage to restore his body, the darkness energy will still destroy him. Only by using the righteous energy of the world and the huge amount of lightning energy to dispel the dark energy can it better restore its body and allow it to be reborn. Previously, when I launched the lightning energy bombardment, I already used the aura of the origin of nature to protect the senior's life imprint. It should have been fine. This is called being too concerned and confused." Ming Ming snorted and ignored Chiyu. She floated to a branch of the ancient tree and leaned on it like a daughter leaning on her father's embrace. Her eyes were full of joy. Chiyu's gaze swept across the Zodiac warriors and said with gratification, "Everyone has used your actions to prove your strength. It seems that the cultivation in the 5 elements domain has not been in vain. If it wasn't for your courage, I'm afraid that today's situation would not have ended so easily. Everyone, start cultivating. I will continue to transfer the aura of the origin of nature into the 5 elements domain. It will help you recover your strength. Cultivation cannot be stopped, at least not before the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors reach the 9th cloud level. If everyone can reach the 9th cloud level, then don't even talk about Satan. Even if 2 or 3 of them come, we can easily deal with them." The members of the 12 Zodiac teams were already used to listening to Chiyu's orders. As soon as they heard his words, they immediately dispersed and went to the most suitable 5 elements mountain to cultivate. However, the Zodiac Guardian God warriors stayed behind. Ryue walked to Chiyu's side and took the initiative to hold his hand. She exclaimed, "This really is a magical place. I originally thought that I would need at least a year to break through my bottleneck, but I didn't expect that I would break through here. Everyone's strength has increased very quickly. The lower your strength, the more obvious the effect. Now, all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors have reached the 8th cloud level. We've all reached above the 8 clouds. Me, Ming Ming, Su Dong, and Guanping have all reached the 9 clouds realm. We have our own domain. I believe that it won't be long before each of us can reach the 9th cloud level. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Zodiac Guardian domain will look like when everyone reaches the 9th cloud level. Those Greek Guardians can no longer be compared to us. If the battle at Mount Everest happens again, I'm afraid that they will immediately be destroyed by us." Chiyu nodded. "I won't forget what happened back then. Once the matters in hell and the underworld are settled, it will be time for us to settle the score with the Greek Guardians." Chiyu, Ryue suddenly called out to Chiyu. Her gaze also became much gentler. Chiyu was stunned. "What's wrong?" Ryue said, "Actually, those Greek Guardians are not all bad people. I've discussed it with Snow Girl. There are only 3 real enemies: Yumu, Yiyun, and Pope Marty. Everything that happened in the past happened because of them. So, when dealing with the Greek Guardians, can we let the others go?" Chi let out a long sigh. "No, you're missing one person. There's still me. If I wasn't so stupid that I couldn't see through Yama's plan, I wouldn't have implicated the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King, Brother Klinsman, and Wenting." Pain flashed through his eyes. Although it had been a long time, he could never forget what had happened back then. "Chiyu, don't be like this. In that situation, anyone would have fallen for it." Snow Girl had already come to Chiyu's side and comforted him softly. The moment she mentioned her father, her gaze became much dimmer. Chiyu took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. A smile appeared on his face. All right, let's not talk about these things for now. At the very least, we have to wait until we solve the problems caused by the alignment of the 9 stars before we get involved in my personal grudges. All right, everyone, continue with your training. I have to go out and take charge of the situation. Marty can't, after all. His sacred army can't stop the Burning Legion. 5 days should be enough for everyone to recover and improve. It should be enough for everyone to recover and improve. However, you still have to be ready to fight at any time. Ryue, I'll leave the tactical arrangements to you. 5 days passed by quickly. This time, Satan kept his promise. The Hell City did not send a single soldier outside the Hell City again. The rare peace gave everyone a chance to recuperate. Silver weapons from various European Union countries arrived one after another. By the time they reached the outskirts of Berlin, the number of European Union troops had reached more than 1 million. One had to know, in a war that was dominated by modern technology, the number of soldiers reaching 1 million was definitely a very terrifying thing. Moreover, they were all heavy weaponry troops. All kinds of long-range firepower were firmly aimed in the direction of Hell City. As soon as the order was given, the carpet bombing could immediately begin. Standing at the forefront of the battlefield and looking at the majestic Hell City in the distance, Chiyu couldn't help but reveal a trace of a pondering look in his eyes. 5 days had passed. His strength had naturally recovered to its peak. Hell City was very quiet. Only the dark red energy protection light remained. Within the city, Ming Ming had millions of soldiers from the Burning Hell Legion, but they didn't make the slightest sound. This situation made Chiyu feel a little uneasy because the silence in Hell City was a little frightening. According to the time on Earth, it should be night now. Although it had been a few days since day and night were separated, as an Earthling, Chiyu was still used to judging the time. In a few more hours, the 5 days of truce in Hell City would be over. What was Satan doing now? After all, the Burning Legion was a terrifying existence. Just from the way they fought without fear of death, it was enough to show all of this. Although they had already destroyed 200,000 of them, but the entire Burning Legion still had a total of 8 million soldiers. No matter how strong the Zodiac Legion was, they only had a little more than 100 people. Once Satan attacked with all his strength, then he could only choose to strategically retreat. This time, the battle with Hell would probably last for a long time. At this moment, Chiyu really missed his Xianyuan sword. His strength had already increased to a level that surpassed Satan's. If only he had the Xianyuan sword by his side. Chiyu believed that if he went all out, it would be very difficult for Satan and Lucifer to survive his attack. The attack power of the Xianyuan sword, coupled with his super strong energy, would be a perfect attack. Unfortunately, Xuanyuan's soul was still sleeping in Xuanyuan's tomb, waiting for him to wake it up with the heavenly fire. But how would he have the time to look for the heavenly fire now? At least on Earth, there was no place that could raise his fire thundercloud force to such a level. Chiyu was letting his imagination run wild. Suddenly, his mental strength fluctuated slightly. The gaze in his eyes suddenly became like 2 sharp blades, looking in a direction. Come out. If it weren't for the fact that you're not hostile, I'm afraid you would have been destroyed by now. Along with Chiyu's voice, a purple figure quietly appeared not far away from him. Seeing this person, Chiyu couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. I thought you were in Hell City. It was none other than the Queen of the Vampires, Christie. Christie's pale face revealed a faint smile. How is that possible? I will never stand on the opposite side of you. You should be very clear about this. Chiyu smiled and walked to Christie's side. He looked at her from head to toe. Her aura was obviously somewhat unstable. It seemed to be the result of a large amount of energy consumption, but it didn't seem like it was caused by a battle. Chiyu didn't ask much. The gentle energy of the origin of nature directly entered Christie's body and quickly restored her energy. Christie smiled. You're still so attentive. Thank you. It took me 4 whole days to fly back. I'm really tired. Chiyu was a little puzzled. Why aren't you in Hell City? I heard that after you unified all the vampire families, the Dark Parliament seemed to attach great importance to you. They even arranged a very high position for you in the Dark Parliament. Christie snorted disdainfully. Even if I inherited the bloodline of vampires, I never thought of myself as a person belonging to the dark side. Is that how you see me? Chiyu smiled. How can that be? We were classmates in the past. Christie rolled her eyes at Chiyu. She seemed to recall what happened between her and Chiyu. The Dark Parliament did look for me. When the weather suddenly changed and the earth was shrouded in darkness, the Dark Parliament informed me that hell had descended on the human world. He asked me to lead the powerhouses of the vampire families to the Dark Parliament. I had a bad feeling at that time. I tried to contact you once, but I couldn't get in touch with you. After thinking for a long time, I made up my mind not to let the vampires participate in this war. After all, compared to those fellows from hell, the vampires are still too weak. So, after I hid all my subordinates, I ran here alone to meet up with you. The vampires may not help you, but I, Christie, am your friend. Naturally, I will stand on your side. Thinking about what Christie said before, Chiyu's heart moved. He said in surprise, "You didn't send your vampires to Yin Huang, did you?" Christie smiled. "You're really smart. I haven't even said it, and you've already guessed it." Chiyu smiled bitterly. "Christie, you're really getting more and more daring. Aren't you afraid that your vampires will cause trouble in Yin Huang?" Christie said proudly, "They won't dare, unless they want to challenge my dignity." Before sending them over, I had already asked around. The war only happened in the West. There were no changes in the Yin Huang Republic, so I naturally chose to send them to my motherland. Don't worry, I've already told them. If they dare to do anything, it'll be their doomsday when I return. Furthermore, don't forget that the experts from the various clans all have my blood in them. You should have heard of the blood transmutation virus. At the prince rank and above, the blood division virus had its own password. Well, it was more appropriate to describe it as a password. Although the experts of the great clans had greatly increased their strength with the help of my primordial blood, they were also under the control of the blood division virus. If anyone dared to betray me, then the blood division virus in their bodies would activate. At that time, they would definitely suffer a fate worse than death. So, these guys are very loyal to me now, even more loyal than they were to Klinsman. Chapter 330. Christie, you should return to Yin Huang. You shouldn't have participated in this battle. Chiyu looked at Christie dotingly. Ever since Klinsman's death, he felt more like an elder brother to Christie. He wished he could take care of her like Klinsman did, just like how he took care of his younger sister. Christie said with dissatisfaction, "What? Are you looking down on my strength?" Chiyu shook his head. "No, of course not. In terms of individual strength, you aren't any weaker than the chairman of the Dark Faction. But you have to understand that we're facing an army of close to 3 million soldiers from the Burning Legion. A person's strength is ultimately limited. Moreover, you belong to the Dark Faction, and your dark energy is limited against the powerhouses of the Dark Faction. Besides," Chiyu paused and looked deeply at Christie. "You have to leave a way out for yourself." Christie asked in surprise, "What? Do you think I'll be in cahoots with the Dark Faction? Since I'm here today, I haven't considered the consequences. If we really fail this time, the entire world will be plunged into darkness. What's the point of my personal loss?" Chiyu looked deeply into Christie's eyes. "All right then, you can stay. Since you're here, train with my companions. It'll be beneficial for you to improve your strength." The five-colored radiance expanded and absorbed Christie's body. Her arrival increased Chiyu's strength by a lot. The multicolored light expanded and sucked Christie's body in. Her arrival had imperceptibly increased the power in Chiyu's hands. Christie had become the queen of the Blood Clan. Her strength wasn't much weaker than Lingare's. She could definitely be considered a super powerhouse. A few hours passed by quickly, and the time agreed upon in the bet was about to arrive. However, there were still no movements in Hell City. Looking at this scene, Chiyu couldn't help but feel worried. The Sacred Army was already in formation behind him. After a few days, the strength of the entire Sacred Army had increased by a few notches. The church's powerhouses who had rushed over from churches all over the world had formed a sacred army of more than 10,000 people. Under Marty's leadership, it was at least a strong force. "Mr. Chi, Why haven't they made a move yet? Malty asked Chiyu nervously. Chiyu smiled faintly. Do you really want them to make a move? Satan must have made some special preparations. Your Holiness the Pope immediately informed the armies of the various countries to prepare for carpet bombing. When the time comes, I will try my best to hold Satan back. He wanted to minimize his protection of the Burning Legion. Hopefully, these weapons from Earth would be of some use. When the 8 million strong army arrives, we can only choose to retreat. Understood. Malty immediately contacted the Allied forces. Now, in a certain sense, Chiyu is the true leader of the Allied forces. At the very least, before he gave the order, the Allied forces would definitely not make any rash moves. Suddenly, Malty, who was in contact with the Allied forces, had a drastic change in expression. This is bad, Mr. Chi. We've suddenly lost contact with the Allied forces. Chiyu's eyes lit up. What did you say? We've lost contact with the Allied forces? This is bad. Satan must have sent someone to infiltrate the Allied forces. Strange. Why didn't I discover it? Could it be that Satan went by himself again? At the thought of this, Chiyu's heart instantly turned cold. Satan was no longer as rash as before. Without the support of the Allied forces, how could it be easy to go against the Burning Legion? What filled Chiyu's heart with horror was that Satan was actually able to deal with the Allied forces without making a sound. This was something he had never expected. At this moment, there was finally movement from the direction of Hell City. A large area of green flames lit up in the sky, and countless hell creatures of the Burning Legion flew out of Hell City like rain. In an orderly formation, they slowly approached them. The Burning Legion's advance was not fast, but there was an endless stream of them coming out of Hell City. As the Burning Legion approached, the formless pressure grew stronger and stronger. Chiyu's face had already lost some of his previous confidence. What made Chiyu's heart sink was that when the Burning Legion was about 3,000 meters away from them, he saw Satan and Lucifer's figures in the air. They were actually still there and did not sneak attack the Allied forces. Then, how was the Allied forces destroyed? Could it be that there were powerhouses of that level in the Hell Camp? A faint light flickered, and the light in Chiyu's eyes became more and more concentrated. He knew that he could not go to the Allied forces to find out what was going on. Otherwise, Marty and his sacred army would definitely not be able to resist the Burning Legion led by Satan. At this moment, the only thing he could do was to stay here and do his best to bring as much harm to the Burning Legion as possible. This was the only way to slow down the Burning Legion's invasion of humans. Zodiac army stepped forward. A colorful light surged out of Chiyu's body, and the Zodiac army, which had rested for 5 days, reappeared by his side. There were more than 100 of them, and every one of them had fully recovered their strength. With Chiyu's natural source energy, the injuries they had suffered previously were nothing. Their appearance also boosted the morale of Chiyu's side. After all, most of the Sacred Army members had seen the strength of the Zodiac Army. Chiyu nodded at Snow Girl and said, "The 12 Zodiac squad will be temporarily under your command. I will temporarily leave it to you, Shangbing, the plant soul, and Christy to manage it. You must always remember your own safety. Prioritize your own safety. If you can't withstand the enemy's attack, retreat immediately. Understood?" Snow Girl naturally understood Chiyu's meaning, so she nodded gently. Chiyu's gaze fell on the other Zodiac Guardian warriors, and a trace of arrogance shot out from his eyes. "Zodiac Guardian warriors, follow me to battle." Chiyu didn't fly up. He took large strides and walked in the direction of the Burning Legion. At this moment, the aura he exuded was absolutely unwavering. It was definitely the kind of feeling that he would never give in to a million people. Although he was alone, in the eyes of the crowd behind him, Chiyu was extremely lofty. The 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors stepped forward at the same time. Following behind the king of the Zodiac, everyone's faces were calm. They knew that this day would come sooner or later. If the previous battle with the Burning Legion was just a small test, then today would be the real battle. Although it wasn't a fight to the death, but this battle was extremely important to humans. If they won, then Hell's morale would be greatly suppressed, and it would be difficult for them to achieve anything. But if they lose, they will. In that case, the West would probably be ravaged by the Burning Legion for a long period of time. Chiyu's steps were firm. Seeing that the dark aura in front of him was getting stronger and stronger, he didn't hesitate at all. Faint rays of light were constantly released from his body, and layers of valiant energy erupted. Silver and black rays of light soared into the sky, and a huge shadow of Kirin appeared in midair. The faint rays of light flickered, and Chiyu's gaze became more and more ferocious. He looked up to the sky and shouted, "Satan!" With Lucifer and Lingaire's support, Satan's huge figure appeared in front of the Burning Legion in a few flashes. He raised his hand, and the orderly Burning Legion stopped in their tracks. His huge body landed on the ground, and a huge energy aura gushed towards Chiyu. "Chiyu, do you think you still have a chance today? I'll give you one last chance. Surrender. As long as you're willing to help me wipe out all the resistance forces on Earth, then I'll marry my daughter to you. You have to understand that my position will be inherited by my daughter from now on, and everything she has will naturally be yours. Don't you want to be the ruler of Earth?" When Lungaire heard that her father might marry her to Chiyu, the gaze in her eyes clearly brightened a lot. However, when she heard the latter part of his words, the expression on her face immediately became gloomy again. This was because she knew that Chiyu would never agree to it. Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "Let's see who's the real deal. Satan, if I destroy you and Lucifer here first, then what do you think will happen to your Burning Legion?" A cold light flashed in Satan's eyes, and he said in a deep voice, "Even if the Burning Legion only has one soldier left, they will still wipe out Earth and turn this place into our world. Since you've already chosen your own path, then let me send you to the heavenly realm or the God realm." With a wave of his hand, the Burning Legion, which was still advancing slowly before, let out a torrential roar at the same time. They charged wildly like rolling thunder, causing the ground to rumble. The huge energy waves caused the entire battlefield to tremble. The Burning Legion's real attack had arrived. This time, it wasn't just a portion of their military strength. Satan had already staked everything on this battle today. 12 Zodiac, Guardian Domain. Chiyu's expression became very calm. He instantly took a step back and integrated into the camp of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors. The 12 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors quickly spread out in formation, forming a circle with Chiyu at the center. Immediately after, an enormous energy fluctuation was generated from their bodies, and the 12 phantoms in the air began to move in an irregular rhythm. The Burning Legion's charge was getting closer and closer, and Chiyu's eyes had completely turned silver at this time. "Satan, what you're about to see is the most powerful strength of the Eastern Guardian. I'll let you understand that hell will never invade the human world." 12 rays of light soared into the sky, and in midair, the 12 shadows completely overlapped. Then, the words of the 12 earthly branches appeared separately, forming a series of rune-like light shadows that quickly rotated around the Zodiac Guardian Warriors. Kirin's shadow remained in the center of the formation, and circles of invisible energy aura gushed out, causing the surrounding ground to collapse. The huge energy light had increased to an incomparably powerful level in an instant. Chiyu sat cross-legged in midair, with his hands on his knees. The energy in his body had been completely released in the form of Kirin's origin energy. Under such circumstances, his energy had reached an unprecedented level. Every time the huge energy wave moved, the energy released by the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors would become more condensed. Suddenly, the 12 energy columns instantly shot out a ray of light, condensing on Chiyu's body. The huge energy aura immediately engulfed his body and Kirin's shadow at the same time. Then, a silver light completely engulfed the bodies of all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, turning them into a large silver light. What was the real Zodiac Guardian Domain? Only when Kirin and the 12 Zodiac Guardian Warriors reached the 9-cloud level would they be able to display the real power of the Zodiac Guardian Domain. Although Chiyu and the Zodiac Guardian Warriors had not reached the 9-cloud level, their average strength was above the 8-cloud level, which was enough for them to display a part of the most powerful domain. Even Chiyu did not expect such a strong energy reaction when he displayed the domain. He suddenly understood, and a faint smile appeared in his eyes. The silver light had completely engulfed their bodies in an instant. This was a silver ocean, and all the 12 Zodiac Guardian warriors sat cross-legged around Chiyu's body. Each of them had their eyes closed, as though they had lost all senses. Their bodies also turned silver at this moment, with Chiyu's body as the center, forming the most intimate connection. Faint energy flickered, and every time it flickered, the aura on Chiyu's body would become stronger. However, at this moment, they could no longer see the Burning Legion outside. What the hell creatures of the Burning Legion saw was another scene. The 13 humans had suddenly disappeared in a strong silver light. Satan and Lucifer frowned at the same time. They could vaguely feel that the silver light in front of them was filled with a dangerous aura. At this moment, the silver light suddenly shrank and immediately expanded to a height of 100 meters. Chiyu's voice was heard again, but this time his voice sounded a little strange, as though it was synthesized by an electronic device. Satan, watch. I'll help you purify your subordinates. That silver light actually condensed in the air just like that. What appeared was a tall and graceful figure. That's right, it was Hai Ryue, the Zodiac Dragon Warrior, magnified 100 times. The aura on her body was still Hai Ryue's, and even the expression on her face and the light on her body were no different. However, the Hai Ryue who appeared in front of Satan and Lucifer now had an aura that could be calculated in 10 times. Hai Ryue, who had already reached the 9-cloud level, had an increase of more than 10 times. What kind of concept was that? Even Chiyu couldn't compete with Hai Ryue in this state. The ultimate secret of the Zodiac Guardian domain revolved around Kirin. It connected the energy aura of all 13 Zodiac Guardian warriors together. It allowed everyone's thundercloud force to be combined through their own energy source through Kirin's guidance. Usually, the Zodiac Guardian warriors were indeed powerful, but they were only a dozen individuals after all. However, after the energy was combined, they were no longer as simple as an individual. What kind of feeling would it be when everyone's energy was concentrated on one Zodiac Guardian warrior? In other words, one Zodiac Guardian warrior could unleash the power of all the people combined. In that case, this situation could only be described as terrifying. Originally, before all of them reached the 9-cloud level, the Zodiac Guardian domain couldn't unleash this secret. However, Chiyu was different from the previous Kirin. Although he was only at the 8-cloud level, he had already surpassed any ordinary 9-cloud Kirin. Right now, he had already surpassed any ordinary 9-cloud Qilin. Coupled with the fact that he had the source of nature in his body that could fuse with all types of energy, he was able to easily complete the final mystery of the Zodiac protection domain. The gigantic Hai Ryue. Hai Ryue's body was more than 100 meters tall. Her gaze was unusually calm. At this moment, Chiyu's voice kept ringing in Hai Ryue's mind. She lowered her head and looked at her body. A faint smile appeared on Ryue's face. The feeling of being filled with absolute power was so wonderful. Of course, her smile would be in the near future. The smile of the Burning Legion as the Grim Reaper. A faint silver light instantly expanded. The 2 dragon wings on Ryue's back suddenly stretched out. Other than her strength instantly increasing to more than 10 times her peak state, she realized that none of her abilities had changed. Her strength had completely expanded to a terrifying level, especially her own energy aura. It was incomparable to anyone else's. Even when she was with Chiyu in the past, she didn't feel such great power. At this moment, Ryu had only used the first stage of attribute mutation. Her enchanting body was covered in silver-white armor. She watched the Burning Legion charging towards her. Ryu stood there and slowly raised her arms. Clearly visible silver light spots began to condense behind her back. Every time the huge dragon wings flapped, a gust of wind would appear. Ryu saw that her dragon power had already turned silver. However, the attributes were no different from before. A faint smile appeared on her alluring face. Dragon Wing Starburst, a skill that she used frequently in the past, had appeared. Among the battle techniques of the Zodiac Dragon Warrior, Dragon Wing Starburst was a very ordinary skill. Every spot of starlight was about 3 to 5 centimeters in diameter. However, at this moment, every spot of starlight had already expanded to the extent of 1 meter in diameter. Even Satan's expression changed when he saw this powerful aura. The massive ball of silver light formed a sea of silver light behind Ryu, blotting out the sky. Even the sacred army behind her couldn't see the enemy in front of them because of this sea of silver light. Go, Dragon Wing Starburst. Ryu's cold voice was like the call of the Grim Reaper. The silver light spots floated out, and in the blink of an eye, they had already smashed towards the charging enemies like a meteor shower. Satan roared angrily. His body instantly enlarged in the air, and he raised his Demon King's domain to the limit. He also became about 100 meters tall and rushed towards Ryu. Lucifer, on the other hand, released his own energy aura. He held the Demon King's sword that Satan had just thrown to him and blocked the silver light spots in midair. If it had been the Dragon Wing Starburst in the past, Lucifer would have only needed to expand his domain to completely block it. However, the current Dragon Wing Starburst had undergone a fundamental change. How could it be easy to block it? The huge energy fluctuations continued to rise. When Lucifer's Demon King's sword cleaved through a ball of starlight, his expression had already changed drastically. Of course, a ball of starlight couldn't cause him any harm. However, it was that ball of starlight that caused his body to remain in mid-air for a full second. 1 second was enough for the Dragon Wing Starburst to display its might. The rumble caused the ground to tremble once again. This time, the tremors spread throughout the entire Germany. The enemies that had rushed towards Ryu were almost wiped out in an instant. At least 100,000 soldiers of the Burning Legion had been completely annihilated by her attack. It was just a single attack, but it had achieved half of the battle results that the Sky Zodiac Legion had worked so hard to achieve. How terrifying was this level of strength? This was also the true power of the Zodiac Guardian Domain. Satan had already rushed in front of Ryu. His body swelled up. He waved his huge right fist, which erupted with a dazzling dark red light, and directly bombarded Ryu's body. A contemptuous smile appeared on Ryu's face. She didn't feel any threat from Satan at all. A faint light flickered on her body. She also stretched out her right palm. The silver dragon power expanded, and the dark red light emitted by Satan became so insignificant in front of Ryu that it directly shattered. Meanwhile, Ryu's right palm had already grabbed Satan's right fist. Satan suddenly felt a sense of panic as he looked at Ryu up close. That was because he had already discovered the secret of Ryu's power. She had combined the power of 13 people. Moreover, one of them was even more powerful than him. What kind of power was that? Ryu quickly gave him the answer. She waved her dragon palm, and the huge dragon power instantly expanded. Satan's equally huge body was directly lifted up by her. Then, Ryu suddenly waved her slender arm, and Satan's body was directly thrown out like a sack. Ryu was extremely experienced in actual combat. Of course, she wouldn't let Satan have it easy. Therefore, when Satan's body was thrown out, he was not thrown into the sky. If he was thrown into the sky, then when he fell to the ground, he would at most smash a few people to death. However, if he was thrown horizontally, he would directly sweep the ground towards the Burning Legion. That would be a completely different result. Satan's huge body suddenly flew horizontally along the ground, like a bowling ball. Countless of his subordinates were crushed into minced meat. His huge 12 wings on the ground were like 12 grim reaper scythes. Wherever they passed, countless subordinates were cut to death by his wings. The huge energy fluctuations continued to rise, rushing out for nearly a kilometer, crushing tens of thousands of hell creatures of the Burning Legion to death. Only then did Satan stop moving forward. The energy within his body was also greatly damaged, and even the Demon King's domain was almost shattered. Shock, absolute shock. He never expected the opponent in front of him to be so powerful. Ryu didn't pay attention to Satan. The dragon wings, chasing stars, appeared behind her again. This time, her energy had increased to an even more powerful level. Lucifer stared at the huge Rhea, dumbfounded. He didn't even have the courage to rush forward. In a flash, he arrived at Satan's side and lifted Satan's huge body from the ground. "Your Majesty, how did this human become so powerful?" This is too terrifying," Lucifer said in a low voice. Satan's eyes flickered with a cold light. "This is their combined energy. Naturally, it's very powerful. This should be a special cultivation technique. However, I believe that even they can't maintain this state for too long. Once the time is up, they will naturally be released from their current state. When that time comes, they will definitely become very weak. Now, we can only use the lives of our subordinates to make up for it. Order all the Burning Legion soldiers to disperse and attack. Try to reduce the destruction on the surface as much as possible." As soon as Satan gave his order, the second dragon wings, chasing stars, appeared. This time, even more Burning Legion soldiers were destroyed. Currently, less than 2.6 million of the 3 million Burning Legion soldiers were left. These losses were caused by Chi Yu and his Zodiac warriors. Chi Yu's voice rang out in the sky above the Sacred Legion. "What are you waiting for? This is your best chance." Upon hearing Chi Yu's voice, the members of the 12 Zodiac warriors were the first to react. Snow Girl, Christy, Shang Bing, and Plant Soul floated up at the same time and landed on the back of a golden-winged eagle, leading the 120 members of the 12 Zodiac warriors as they charged forward. Malti raised his scepter high, and layers of milky white light were released. He shouted, "For the glory of the Lord, sacred army, for the victory of the holy war, fight." The milky white light instantly spread to every member of the sacred army. Their bodies were covered in a layer of dazzling radiance. The attack began. The sacred energy increased their speed to a speed faster than a galloping horse. The 10,000 of them charged forward at the same time. At this moment, the Burning Legion had scattered, due to Ryue's powerful destructive ability. They met the charge of the 12 Zodiac warriors and the Sacred Legion. In an instant, a chaotic battle broke out. Ryue didn't use any powerful skills. Instead, she activated her dragon wings and unleashed dragon wings, chasing stars. This wide-area attack dealt the greatest damage to the enemies. Although the Burning Legion scattered rapidly, every time the dragon wings chasing stars attacked, tens of thousands of Burning Legion soldiers would die. Ryue's ice-cold gaze focused on Satan's face. Satan and Lucifer didn't move. Under Ryue's aura, they knew that as long as they moved an inch, they would face a destructive attack. Although Ryue might not be able to kill them, they would definitely be severely injured. In fact, Satan's judgment was right. Even though the Zodiac Guardian domain was powerful, its energy consumption was also very fast. Because of this, Chiyu told Ryue to save as much energy as possible and kill as many enemies as possible. As for Satan and Lucifer, Ryue might be able to kill them now. However, if she did, Ryue's energy would be at its lowest point. By then, everyone would have lost too much energy, and they would no longer have the ability to stop the Burning Legion's advance. Furthermore, with Satan and Lucifer's cunning, wouldn't they run if they couldn't defeat them? Although Ryue's energy had increased by 10 times, her body had also increased by 10 times. This made her body a lot more cumbersome than before, and her speed didn't increase by 10 times. This made it impossible for her to give up the battlefield to chase after Satan and the others. Satan and Lucifer looked at each other, although they didn't dare to attack Ryue. When Ryue released her dragon wings, they also released their own energy at the same time to reduce the damage that Ryue could cause as much as possible. Just as the battle entered a stalemate and the Burning Legion suffered heavy casualties, a gray aura quietly appeared behind Chiyu's side. Large patches of gray aura were like a hazy fog, quietly approaching the back of the Sacred Legion. Ryue's body suddenly froze, and she slowly turned around. When she saw the large patch of gray aura, her pupils couldn't help but narrow. Through the Zodiac Guardian domain, Qi Yu's spiritual power replaced Ryue in controlling this huge body. When his spiritual power locked onto the gray aura, he immediately understood what was coming.